Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. On Monday the 14th of May, 2018 at 8:20 p.m. a 999 call was made. Police emergency. Ohio. I think we've been burgled and my wife's been attacked. Whereabouts? What's the address? We're on number 35, the Avenue in Middlesbrough in Thorpe. Right. Is that where your wife is now? Yeah. Well, I've just come home. I was just out. I want to get something to eat and see the lads at work and get my laptop. Yeah. I come home and the house is ransacked and she's just on the floor. She's got duct tape all over her and she's like unconscious, right? Shall I take the duct tape off her? Can she breathe? No. Because she's unconscious. Take the duct tape off her then, please. Can you send someone quick? Yeah, I am. I am. Can I say your name, please? My name's Mitches. Okay. I can't get it off her. I'm going to get someone straight out. Okay. How long will we be? I'm going to get them traveling on blue lights and we're going to get an ambulance straight out as well. Okay. Okay. You said your wife's is your wife. Breathing. Can you feel a pulse? I can't feel anything. My hands are really cold. How long have you been out of the house? About an hour. What's your wife's called, please? Jessica, listen. We've got police traveling down now. Okay. We've got police traveling down now. Right. I've got the duct tape off her. It was on her legs, right by her ankles, and on her arms, and tied like she's been tied up, but her hands are really cold. Are there any marks on her at all? Well, I can see marks on her neck. Like really dark neck. She's been tied up by her hands. Yeah. And also tape around her legs. Yeah. And marks around her neck. Yeah. She's got like blood on her nose and like stuff dripping out onto the floor. And she's non-responsive. No. Jess. Come on, baby. Wake up. We've got mesh. Matish. Please listen to me. Please, baby, wake up. We've got an ambulance coming. They're traveling on blue lights as well. Okay. And we've got there's nobody on scene. Is there a mesh? No, there's nobody here. Nobody. Here. No. Okay. What room are you? Okay, listen. Listen. The police are outside. Can you let your police officers in? It's Jessica. I'll leave her with you. Okay, Matish. I'll leave you with the police officers. Okay. Okay. The caller was 37-year-old Matish Patel. He had come home and found his wife Jessica had been brutally attacked. Cleveland police and paramedics rushed to the scene where Jessica was found on the living room floor. the community of Linthorpe would be rocked as a disturbing case would begin to unfold. Jessica, born in Leeds in 1983, was the oldest of 6 children, and her father described her as a calm and happy child who never caused any bother or trouble. She was close to her family. Her sister Manal was just 18 months apart from her, and she described Jessica as a fun and happy person. She said, "I was always really close with Jessica. Growing up, she wasn't very loud, but she was very nurturing in nature, and she was definitely romantic. She loved Bollywood films and dreamed of having her own love story one day. Jessica had a deep desire to help other people and so wanted to be a pharmacist. She attended Ford University in the early 2000s and then Manchester University after. Whilst at Ford, she had started a relationship with Matish Patel, someone she had first met as a child. The relationship ended shortly after but was later rekindled. They both had similar backgrounds and came from large Hindu families. When they first started dating, Jessica's mother was unwell and Matish was there to support his partner through it, showering her with gifts. In July 2009, Matish and Jessica were married. After living with his family following the wedding, the couple moved to Linthorpe, Middlesbrough, and bought the pharmacy on Roman Road. Although it was a busier area, locals described it as safe and happy. As they own the local pharmacy, the Patels soon became a big part of their community. They also bought a house on the avenue which they did up and started their new life together. The pair were well liked but also private. With everything seemingly falling into place for them, the next step was to start their own family. As Jessica was the oldest sibling, she had strong maternal instincts and wanted to become a mother. However, this did not come easily to them. They had fertility problems. Following several rounds of IVF, they had frozen embryos at a Darlington clinic. Monday, May 14, 2018 began as normal. Mitesh and Jessica went to work with her father stopping by the pharmacy. He remembered seeing his daughter smiling and they agreed he would stop by again the following week. Matish took the earlier shift before heading to the gym later in the day. At 8:20 p.m., the 999 call was made. Despite the best efforts of the emergency services, at just 34 years old, Jessica was gone. Police have launched a murder investigation after a woman was found dead at her home in Middlesbrough. Officers were called to a house on the avenue in Linthorpe at 8:20 p.m. on Monday evening. 34-year-old Jessica Patel, originally from the Leeds area, was found with serious injuries at an address in Linthorpe and was pronounced dead at the scene. Manal said she received a call from her younger sister saying that something had happened in Middlesbrough and that their father was on his way there. As morning rolled around, she woke up and her husband was sat on their bed and she immediately knew something was wrong. He told her beloved sister had died in the night. She called her father, who confirmed the heartbreaking news. Police quickly sealed off the crime scene to preserve any evidence and minimize any potential risk of cross-contamination. Mate explained that Jessica had been at work until around 7 p.m. and that evening he had gone to the pharmacy as he needed to collect his laptop. After this, he went to pick up some food, a pizza from his local takeaway. Around half an hour after he left, he was back at their house. When he went inside, Jessica was on the floor in the living room by the window. Her hands and feet had been bound with duct tape. She was cold and wasn't responding. Tape had been used to tie her feet and hands together. The house had been ransacked. 3 ambulances alongside police were on scene trying to ascertain exactly what had happened. Mate told police that he had only been gone for around half an hour, leaving at 7:44 p.m. The family were shattered, but came together to support each other. They traveled to be with Mate, and Manal said when she saw him, he buried his head into her shoulder and began to sob. It appeared that there was no sexual motive for the killing, meaning police needed to try and find a motive. Who would want Jessica dead and why? The street woke up to a heavy police presence. Word began to spread that there had been a murder on the street. The community could not believe it. Jessica was well known and well liked. She was a big part of her community and people were incredibly fond of her. As there was no sign of a forced entry, police concluded she must have known her attacker and let them in. So started to look at Jessica's inner circle to rule people out. The CCTV from the pizza shop helped to establish a timeline. It showed when Mate was out, giving them a time frame for Jessica's murder. A post-mortem was conducted. It revealed her cause of death was asphyxiation. Pressure had been applied to her neck and it also suggested that a ligature of some kind had been used. On the Thursday, Jessica's family was still with Mate when they got a call from the family liaison officers who asked them to go home as they needed to speak to them. They explained that they were arresting a suspect on suspicion of murder. May 17, 2018. A man has been arrested in connection with the murder of a woman in Middlesbrough. Yesterday afternoon, police arrested a 37-year-old man in the West Yorkshire police area on suspicion of murder following the death of 34-year-old Jessica Patel in Middlesbrough on Monday. The man remains in police custody. Mate Patel was arrested. Jessica's family and the local community were stunned. How could this seemingly loving husband and pillar of the community commit such a brutal offense? During a search of the home, police had found a hard drive in the bedroom that linked to the house's CCTV system, something Mate had failed to mention. The hard drive that stored the footage from the cameras was safely secured away in a cupboard, so if someone were to break in, they wouldn't be able to find the hard drive and destroy the footage, but of course, it wasn't there. It was up in the bedroom. Officers checked the footage. At 3:30 p.m., Mate arrived home from the gym and didn't leave the house. Jessica arrived home at 7 p.m. He left the house at 7:44 p.m. and returned at 8:15 p.m. However, nobody else was seen on the footage going into or coming out of the house. 6 minutes before he called emergency services, the CCTV had been disconnected. A suitcase full of clothes was also found under the bed. When police had conducted a search of the pharmacy, they found jewelry, £25,000, and gold bars hidden in a safe. They also found a plastic bag with £2,000 in it. Police decided to delve deeper into his phone to try and build their case. One of the things they looked at was the iPhone health app that both he and Jessica had used. One feature of the iPhone health app is that it can track a user's steps and heart rate. It showed that in the minutes following the murder, Mate's phone tracked him racing throughout the house. From 7:04 p.m., Jessica's didn't move. 40 minutes later, it showed that her phone moved 14 steps to outside. Mate had moved her phone so that it appeared it had been dropped by a burglar following the break-in. When he returned home, the health app showed that he had climbed the stairs before calling the emergency services a couple of minutes later. It is believed that during this time, he was hiding the CCTV hard drive. Mate Patel was subsequently charged with the murder of his wife. He would plead not guilty. Mr. Justice Goss would preside over the trial. Her sister, Mainel, would say that 95% of what came out in court, her family were completely unprepared for. As the trial of Mate Patel began, the true nature of what had transpired would be laid bare, and his web of lies would begin to unravel. Mate confessed that he had been using the app Grindr and other apps to meet men. He told the court that in his culture, using such apps was considered shameful. He said, "I have not anything to do with killing Jessica." But amongst those who worked at the pharmacy, his use of Grindr was an open secret. They thought Jessica was unaware, but he was often seen on the app and was even captured on CCTV in an embrace with a man he had met on there. However, Jessica was aware of his extramarital affairs with men. Not long after their wedding, he had began an affair with a male doctor, Dr. Amit Patel. The affair would continue for 8 years, with him repeatedly telling her that it was over. Amit had moved thousands of miles away to Australia, and despite his protestations it was over, Jessica would find Mate on the phone with him. She had confided in a family member about it, explaining that Mate would be on the phone for hours with this man and that hers and Mate's sexual relationship was now non-existent. Several weeks before her death, Jessica found out he was back on Grindr and other apps every day and meeting men. And a few days before the murder, he had met with a man and they had exchanged phone numbers. Mate said, however, he did not have sexual contact with this man. The data from his phone also showed that he had been using the apps the day Jessica had died. After learning of the extensivism faithfulness and that he had brought men back to the marital home, Jessica didn't want to try another round of IVF. Nicholas Campbell QC led the prosecution. It was argued that this was a planned out and callous murder, with Mate researching for years how to stage a fake crime scene and how to commit the perfect murder. When what had actually happened to Jessica that night was laid bare, it left the courtroom horrified. She had been injected with insulin, rendering her unable to fight back. After this, he began going around the house to stage the fake break-in. It is believed that Jessica likely stirred at this point as she was still alive. Mate then suffocated her with a plastic bag. The bag had been ripped, indicating that Jessica had desperately tried to rip it off her face during the attack. Mate denied this, saying they were happy and content together. "I didn't need other mates. She was my best mate. She was my wife. I could tell her everything." Despite what he had said, more damning evidence would emerge. The court heard how he had changed his story. First, telling police he hadn't seen Jessica since lunchtime, then admitting to being in the house with her for around 42 minutes after she got back at 7 p.m. When data from his computer was analyzed, it showed that over the past few years, he had searched for how to hire a hitman in the UK, plot to kill my wife, and also insulin overdose. These searches dated back to 2013. Various life insurance policies had been taken out at different times totaling around £2 million, with the first one being made after he had made the computer searches. It was his plan to murder his wife, obtain the money from the life insurance policy, take the embryo she had frozen, and go to Australia to be with the MIT. There they would raise the child as their own. When talking about the insurance policy, Nicholas Campbell said he was planning to use the money to start a new life in Australia, and that life would be shared with the one person he really loved, one who he regarded as his soulmate, another man. During a search of the house, police found a list, the detailed items that Matish wanted to take with him when he fled to Australia. The court heard how the staff at the pharmacy were perplexed with Matesh's behavior following the murder. When he went to the pharmacy on the night of the murder to pick up his laptop, police believed Jessica was already dead by this point, and staff noticed 3 scratches on his neck. He was seen by workers going into the pharmacy store, which wasn't a part of the building he would usually go into. One of the workers said it was odd that he and Mesh usually shook hands when seeing each other, and on this occasion, Matish did not. A neighbor had had a conversation with Matish a week before Jessica's murder. They were talking about safety in the local area, and Matish called his wife stupid, saying she would open the door to anybody, adding she'll end up being murdered. In court, Matesh's lies continued to be exposed. It emerged that he had lied to his trainer and said that he and Jessica shared baby twins together. He said that after them being unable to start a family, having 3 rounds of IVF was a source of shame for him. In December 2012, her younger sister had seen messages between Matesh and Amit saying how much they loved each other. Minal said, when we told Jessica about the message from Amit, Matish blamed her for meddling and not trusting him. Jessica told her family to leave it, and by the next year the couple had moved away to Linthorpe. Minal said Jessica was voicing concerns that Matish was spending a lot of time on his phone and would walk out of the room if she came in while he was on it. She knew it wasn't right, but he took his phone everywhere with him, even into the toilet, and she didn't know his passcode to check who he was talking to. A teenager who worked at the pharmacy said that a few months prior to Jessica's death, he had shown the dark web to Matish. Drugs, weapons, and him were all for sale. Matish began taking notes. He wanted to be able to get back to the sites they had seen. The second time the pair went on the dark web, Matish conducted searches for insulin and suicide. In court, he admitted he had seen a video detailing how long somebody would take to die from being strangled, but he said he had watched it with Jessica, calling it ironic that they had seen it together. He was still adamant that he hadn't been the one who had murdered Jessica. Throughout the investigation, police had uncovered more about this apparently happy couple. IVF was an incredibly difficult and physically exhausting experience. The investigation revealed that Matish had secretly taken a drug that would suppress the sperm count, making it improbable that Jessica would conceive naturally. Her father later found out that Matish had threatened to end the marriage if she did not continue with the IVF treatment. In April 2016, she had confided in her GP that she felt pressure to conceive and subsequently had cognitive therapy. She would later be prescribed medication for her depression and anxiety. The truth about their relationship continued to come out. Not long after they had married, Jessica's grandfather had become ill and was nearing the end of his life. Jessica wanted to be with him and her family. Matish refused. As they were driving one night, Jessica was begging him to let her be with her grandfather. In response, Matish hit her. He had also thrown a mobile phone at her, and she was seen limping by pharmacy staff. Staff members in the pharmacy had also seen him shout at her and reduce her to tears by throwing and kicking things in the dispensary. She had confided in a family member 3 months before her death that Matish had put his hands around her neck. As the abuse and control continued, she became more and more withdrawn and isolated. She was also losing weight. Nicola Taylor, a forensic scientist, testified at the trial. When the police arrived on scene, they too had seen the scratch marks on his neck, something he had attributed to his session at the gym. DNA from Jessica's fingernails came back as a match to Matish, showing that she had been the one to scratch him. This wasn't the only DNA evidence shown to the court. His DNA was also found on the plastic bag used to kill her, and her blood and saliva was on the inside. Not only that, his DNA was also found on the tape that had bound Jessica's hands and feet. Despite the argument that it had got there when he pulled the tape off, no other DNA was found on it. Tape was found in the pharmacy, and police believed that he had hidden it there when he had gone to collect his laptop. Nicholas Campbell QC would later say in a documentary that when the tape that had been used to bind Jessica was laid flat, and compared to the tape found in the pharmacy, it fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. He had wrapped her hands and feet a minimum of 4 times. The jury was shown his police interview. In the interview, he was asked about his movements that evening. Matish didn't cooperate and offered no information. He simply said, "There's nothing to tell." After 12 days of trial, it was time for the jury to deliberate and consider their verdict. The jury would deliberate for just under 3 hours. Matish Patel was found guilty. Jessica's sister, Divya, read a statement on behalf of the family to the court. "The one thing we hope and prayed for above anything else was that in her final moments, she did not suffer. The cruel reality is that she did in fact suffer. She knew exactly who her killer was, and he mercilessly ignored her attempts to fight for her own life as he ended it. We can only imagine the fear and panic she must have felt knowing herself this was it. Thinking of that moment makes our hearts so heavy." He received a sentence of life in prison with a minimum term of 30 years for his crime. Mr. Justice Goss told him, "You are a selfish man, business-driven, wanting a very successful life and wishing to retire at 40. You were also wanting to commit to a life with another man on your own terms. And you well knew that insurance policies would realize $2 million on Jessica's death." Mr. Justice Goss explained that a 30-year minimum term was only used in cases where the crime was particularly severe, adding, "This is such a case." Following his sentencing, her family gave a statement. "Since that tragic day of the 14th of May, we have tied our brains into knots, agonizing over what may have happened, going through every scenario, trying to put together a puzzle for which we had none of the pieces. What we have learned over the last few weeks has been truly shocking and beyond even our worst nightmares. It is still incomprehensible that this has happened and that she is gone. A life sentence will never be enough. We will never get Jessica back and her dreams and wishes will remain unfulfilled. However, we as a family Take some solace in that an element of justice has been served and that the right person has been convicted and will remain behind bars for decades to come. We would like to thank everyone associated with this case who have worked tirelessly in aiding our fight to get justice for Jessica. The Senior Investigating Officer, Family Liaison Officers, and the team at Cleveland Police, the CPS, the leading counsel, Mr. Campbell QC, and Junior Counsel, Mr. Perks. A huge amount of work has been undertaken to ensure the right outcome. And we cannot find the words to express how immensely grateful we are for all their efforts. We would also like to thank all our family and friends who have supported us through this extremely difficult time. It is clear just how loved Jessica was by everyone that knew her. Jessica will never be forgotten, and we hope and pray that she is at peace. Now, we will always be a part of her as she will always be a part of us. Manal spoke of his crocodile tears after Jessica's death. I sat down on the sofa next to him and went to hug him, and he immediately buried his head into my shoulder. He held my dad's hand with the hands that had strangled and murdered his own daughter. How could someone do that? The case of Maj Patel was a legal first in the United Kingdom, using an app to show someone's movements at the time a crime was committed. Following the trial, a 74-page domestic homicide review was published in July 2020 by Mid-Lesper Community Safety Partnership. It gave further insight into the relationship and what could be done to stop cases like this from happening in the future. It detailed how Jessica had told her sister that she had been verbally abused by Maj's mother and that she was often being put down and degraded by Mesh. The report said this became repetitive and destroyed Jessica's confidence. The report stated that the move to Linthope was likely another attempt by Maj to isolate her further from her family. Following the text that had been found by Divya from Amit, Manal would second the saying, "When they moved to Middlesbrough, I saw less and less of Jessica." To me, looking at it now, it was a strategic move on his part, so she didn't really have anyone at all near her. It's now clear Jessica was facing domestic abuse. She was being emotionally abused, and her mental state wasn't as well as it should have been. The review also found that the GP Jessica had spoken to had not probed about potential domestic abuse, calling it a missed opportunity. The homicide review stated her death was an honor killing. Divorce on the grounds that Matish was gay could never have been a reason for him to end his marriage. Consequently, the only way Matish may have felt able to leave the marriage with honor was by killing Jessica. Jessica did nothing that was or might be perceived as dishonorable. However, her death at the hands of Mitesh should be considered an honor killing because Mitesh killed her to try and protect his own honor. A minimum of 7 recommendations were made following the review, including how reporting worries as a colleague might be improved, how people could spot the signs of abuse, and how professionals could better spot these signs, too. After the domestic homicide review was published, Jessica's family issued a statement. "We hope this review will help other victims, those closest to them and the wider public, to recognize the various forms and signs of abuse, and will remove any barriers, be it cultural or otherwise, to seeking help in getting support they need." As a family, this review was an extremely painful process, but we recognize the importance of highlighting Jessica's story to try and provide a voice for her and others that may be suffering in silence. So that this act of evil is not repeated, we encourage everyone to open their eyes, to ask questions, and never assume. Everything is okay. The murder of Jessica Patel was shocking and brutal. She died in an appalling way at the hands of the man she had dedicated her life to. She was a kind and giving person who cared deeply for other people. Her family said Jessica was a rarity. She was beautiful on the outside and even more so on the inside. She had a truly selfless soul and afforded everyone she met with a kindness and generosity that was second to none. Jessica, rest peacefully and know that we miss you and will love you always and forever. Story 2. Everyone said that Jerry Michael Williams had it all. Known to everyone as Mike, he had a beautiful family whom he adored, a well-paying career in real estate which provided them a lovely home and a great circle of friends. He came from humble beginnings. His father was a bus driver and his mother worked as a daycare provider. The family lived in a trailer, so his parents saved up all their money to send Mike and his brother Nick to get a good education at North Florida Christian High School. Mike excelled in school and alongside his studies, he started working night shifts in a convenience store to help support his parents. His friends said everyone just liked him because he was just a very genuine soul. It wasn't unlike Mike to step into the role of protective older brother. If he thought anyone was picking on you, he would stick up for you. He was always there to protect me. It wasn't long before the teenage Mike met fellow student Denise Merrill. Mike was playing football and Denise was a cheerleader. They also worked on the school council together. Around this time, he also met Brian Winchester, who fast became his best friend, along with Brian's girlfriend, Kathy, and the couples were very close. During his school years, Mike discovered what would become a lifelong hobby for him, duck hunting. His mother, Cheryl, said Mike had loved the outdoors and helping his dad hunt since he was about 6 years old. Mike, Denise, Brian, and Kathy all graduated in 1988, and both couples ended up marrying in 1994. Still very close. Denise became an accountant. Mike went to work in real estate, and Brian went into selling insurance policies. Never one to shy away from hard work. This trait followed him into adulthood. He rarely took days off and worked 14 to 16-hour days, starting his day in the office before dawn and sometimes only returning to the family home to eat dinner before heading back to work. His boss said he was the hardest working man he had ever known and at one point had to take his keys to the building away, so he physically couldn't come into work over the weekend. In 1999, Denise and Mike had a little girl called Ansley. I was totally overwhelmed. She was due Tuesday and she would have made me wait a whole other year for Mother's Day. So, she came yesterday so I could enjoy this day today with her. It was unbelievable. I have a whole new respect for my wife and women in general and what they go through to bring a new child, a new life into the world. And the family were living in a small but upscale and affluent neighborhood. Mike's dad sadly passed away, which had a profound impact on him and made his relationship with his little girl feel even more precious. After this, the couple took out a $1.5 million life insurance policy on Mike, sold to them by Brian. Another 2 policies were taken out and the total reached almost $2 million. Mike said, after what had happened to his father, he wanted to make sure that if the worst happened, his family were well taken care of. Thursday, December 14, 2000. Mike had been spending a lot of time with his mother, helping support her after the loss of his father. he and Denise told Cheryl and his brother Nick that they were hoping to have another baby very soon. Mike couldn't wait to give Ansley a sibling, and having a big family was something he had dreamed of. The couple were also planning a cruise and looking forward to celebrating their 6-year wedding anniversary in a couple of days. Saturday, December 16, 2000. Just before dawn, Mike packed up his hunting gear, attached his boat to his truck, and set off for Lake Seal, about an hour's drive away. An early morning drive he made most mornings to a spot he loved to duck hunt on. Around noon, Denise called her father. Mike was still not home. Today was the couple's 6th wedding anniversary, and they'd made big plans to celebrate, so why he hadn't come home was a mystery. Brian Winchester and Denise's father drove down to the lake. Lake Seal is about 35 miles long, but Mike would only visit certain spots, and Brian said they should start with these. 12 hours later at 2:30 a.m. they found Mike's Ford Bronco near a remote boat launch. After this, they discovered his boat in the dark, swampy, shallow water. Inside was his shotgun and 2 life jackets. The engine wasn't running, but the boat was still full of gas, and Mike was nowhere. A helicopter was deployed, and divers started looking into the water. Sadly, the search was hindered due to the stormy weather and freezing temperatures. After a few days, it was becoming clear that the chances of Mike being found alive was unlikely. Authorities felt strongly that this was simply a tragic boating accident. Mike's boat had probably hit a stump and he had fallen into the water and drowned as his waders filled up with water. And the reason they couldn't find his body was because he was likely eaten by alligators. A theory his friend Brian Winchester, who often hunted with him, said he sadly agreed with. Cheryl, however, did not agree. She reached out to an expert to ask about the alligator theory. And the expert said alligators tended to stop eating if the temperature in the water drops below a certain point. And if they had eaten him, the chances of him being eaten whole with no trace of him or his clothing was virtually impossible. 700 man-hours over 44 days were spent on the searches, but there was simply nothing there. No clues, no leads, no evidence to be found. And the search was finally called off 6 months after he was last seen. Everything would change when a hat was found floating in the water, followed by a pair of waders. This led to the discovery of a flashlight, a red jacket, and Mike Williams' hunting license. These items appeared to have no damage to them, something they were expecting to see if an alligator had attacked Mike. They were so unaffected by the elements. His license was still legible and his flashlight still worked, which made no sense given the fact they would have been in the swampy water for 6 months. Everyone was shocked that after all the hours and days of searching, this seemingly had been under their noses the whole time. Officer David Arnett admitted it looked unusual and out of place right off the bat. He noted that Mike's truck was found at an undeveloped landing, which meant he would have had to drag his boat through the mud to get to the lake. And the bad storm should have blown his boat to the eastern shore, but it was found on the western shore. In Florida, when someone is missing, you normally have to wait 5 years before they can legally be declared dead. But just 6 months after he was last seen, Denise requested a death certificate for her husband. And with this, Mike Williams was declared dead with accidental drowning listed as the cause. Cheryl had no idea this was the case and refused to believe it was, but Denise was having none of it. According to Cheryl, Denise told her that if she did anything to open a criminal investigation, she would lose any access to her granddaughter. According to those close to the Williams family, Denise quickly distanced herself from her in-laws and cut off communication between them and her daughter. But Denise's friends say she took actually a lot of time to talk to her daughter about her father and what a great man he was. For someone who had already lost her husband and son, the thought of losing her granddaughter was too painful. But she needed answers and decided to carry on, resulting in Mike's case being reopened. In 2005, everyone in the community and those who had been following the case since the start started talking. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester got married. Needless to say, most were a little shocked. Some, however, had been hearing rumors of an affair between the pair for years, and Brian's divorce from Kathy and subsequent proposal to Denise had come as no surprise to them. Brian's ex-wife, Kathy, corroborated the affair allegations, saying she knew something was going on between her ex-husband and Denise for years. A year later, Mike's case would hit the media once again. Jennifer Portman, the news director of the Tallahassee Democrat, saw an article sent in by Cheryl. After reading it, she knew the story didn't add up and his story needed more attention. She began running many a story on Mike, documenting everything, hoping to put his case back on the map. In 2008, law enforcement announced they had started looking into this as being a case of foul play. As the years continued to tick by, and with Mike still missing, Cheryl was working hard, too. In 2011, she held a vigil for her son. It was just her carrying a couple of signs walking up and down the street for Mike. Little did anyone know the police were gathering evidence and investigating Brian and Denise for potential insurance fraud. This was based on Mike's life insurance policies that were collected by the pair of them after he was declared dead. Someone else had come forward during this time and said they actually saw Brian at Lake Seal that morning. And when he was shown a lineup of people, he pointed to Brian and said, "Well, he wasn't smiling like that, but that's definitely him." As the investigation into the insurance continued, Denise and Brian Winchester's marriage started to fall apart. The couple separated in 2012 before divorcing in 2016. The splits had very quickly turned sour, and this would spark a change in Brian. He broke into the back of Denise's car, and when she got in, he held her at gunpoint. As soon as he jumped out of the car, she went straight to the police and reported him for armed kidnap. "What happened today? We're almost in the 4th year of our separation and divorce. Another divorce. Date is moving Wednesday. I'll just tell you about what happened today. So, I go out to my car to go to work. I work at FSU. I was calling my sister and this person starts climbing out of the very back and I couldn't tell at first who it was, but then immediately I knew who it was, but I was screaming. He was up and grabbing me and he pulled my face pretty hard and he goes, 'You know,' he's cussing. 'You know, you will turn here. You will turn here.' And he pulled out a gun, like not a hunting gun, but like a gun you would kill someone with. And he put it right here in my ribs. So, he was in the back, I guess, hiding. And then when he came out, he came up to right behind me. So, like I'm driving and he's right here. So, the gun stayed there the whole time. He finally had let go of the seat. So, I was still buckled in, but I was turning. And I was like, what do you want to talk about? So then he was like, you won't answer my text. You won't answer. I had to do this because you won't answer my text or my calls. Please just call the divorce office. I've lost everything, you know, blah blah blah. So I ended up, we were probably there. I mean, for like it felt, you know, maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So if their cameras do work, I mean, they'll see the whole thing. I would cry some and cry not. It was raining and people would come and go, but I ended up, I mean, of course, in the beginning especially, he was crazed. And then as we were talking, I was just kind of agreeing with whatever he was saying. And I was like, I know that you love me, and he's recently lost his son. His son has decided to move. He had joint custody and now he doesn't. And so he said, I've lost my son. I've lost you. I have nothing to live for. And I was like, well, Brian, you're the only one who can change. So I just kept saying, you've got to start living that way. You know, you could get us all back if you'll just turn your life around. Because he was a Christian at one point, and I was like, if you'll just turn back to the Lord. So the whole time I'm turning this way, I'm buckled in, but he's calm. He's calming down. And so, with the gun still right there, and I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he's like, what am I doing? I could tell he was, you know, and I was like, I don't know. I know you want to talk to me, but this is not the way to do it. I know. What have I done? It's like he kind of woke up. We'll do the injunction. That's the first step. I think it's a restraining order. It's going to keep him from, if he calls you once he starts with that paperwork, that's a violation, and we're going to follow up on that. Okay. So, we'll do what we can. You know, a lot of times people think, you know, it's just a piece of paper. Is it really going to protect me? But it really can work to protect you, and I suggest that we should go there or do certain things here. It does. It really will work to protect you. As the interview progressed, the officer saw the issues between the couple and decided to use this as a way to bring up Mike's case. He wasn't going to kill himself. He was going to kill you so that you couldn't talk about him later. That is the truth. I've been doing this too long. I've talked to everybody I know over the years, for 15 years, about how and what we could do. 15 years ago, he walked in and told you he'd done something, didn't he? Denise. You've got this is not going away. He's going to try to stop people from talking about what he did. I never had any reason to believe that he would do that. He loves the Lord. He was a Christian. That's why I married him. He was doing prison ministry. I was doing prison ministry. Even after everything that he said to me today, I do not believe. No. I don't. And I don't believe he was there to hurt me. He killed Mike, and he did it for you because he wanted you. And I know that's hard, and I know it hurts. But by God, I'm telling you that's what happened. How old was Anansley then? A baby? Not even a year. He didn't care. He killed your husband. Okay, if he is nuts, that crazy, then again, I can't have an officer live with me 24/7. He killed Mike and he buried Mike where no one could ever find him. That is the truth. I'm wondering if you're thinking of the same place today. That he buried Mike because he's done it before. You have to wrap your mind around it. That is what he has done and he's willing to do it again. I'm just starting to feel very uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable for a long time. Because we needed some things on this case and we were hoping one day that either Brian or maybe you could fill in some of the gaps there. But I guess right now I need to focus on this and what happened this morning, and I want to get this restraining order done by 5 o'clock. I want me and my daughter to be safe. There is no doubt that Brian is going to be located and put in jail. What if he starts talking about the past? Way in the past? I don't know. I have no idea what he's going to say. Yeah. What if he starts talking about the disappearance of Mike? I hope he admits this morning. I hope he admits what he did. If they ask him about Mike, I have no idea. I mean, we'll see. The reason Brian got into the car and the conversation he'd had with her that day would soon come to light. And after 16 years of silence, the truth about what had happened to Mike would finally start to come out. We're here in the state of Florida versus Brian Winchester. My client wouldn't like to address the court right now. Never ever did I have any intentions of harming Denise, nor would I. Nonetheless, I do know that she was hurt by my actions. And again, I am truly sorry. I start each day with the memory of him jumping out of the back. And I end each day feeling the gun shoved in my ribs when I turn on my right side trying to sleep. He will finish what he has started. I'm asking you to sentence him to life in prison for the crimes he has committed. It comes down to my life or his. And I'm asking you please choose mine. Thank you. As Brian was set to go to trial, he was offered a deal. If he knew anything about Mike, tell the truth, and gain immunity in his case. In exchange, he would have his sentence reduced to 20 years in prison. He accepted the deal, and finally, he started talking. Brian admitted that the affair began in 1997. And as the years had passed, a plan was hatched to kill Mike, stage his death as an accident, take the insurance money. And in his words, live happily ever after. Her daughter was getting older, and if something were to happen to Mike, she wanted her to be young enough so she wouldn't remember, Brian said. He said he'd been manipulated in ways he didn't realize, stating he was a stupid 30-year-old. The pair first chose the date of December 9, 2000 as the day for Mike to be killed. Brian would take him on a duck hunting trip, knock him overboard, and pretend it was an accident. But on the morning of the 9th, Denise phoned Brian saying they shouldn't go ahead with it as she was having second thoughts. Brian said he was relieved, but also confused. After this, he claimed Denise changed her mind again, and December the 16th was set as the day we launched the boat. It was just like a hunting trip. It was supposed to be the plan. The plan that was discussed and come up with was that he was going to be wearing waders, and the belief was if somebody falls in the water with waders, you're going down. So, we went out like we were going hunting. We got to the area where his waders and jacket were found. I got him to stand up and I pushed him into the water. He got his jacket off and his waders off and he was in a panic. Obviously, I was in a panic. I was driving the boat and I didn't know what to do and I ended up shooting him. After this, Brian dragged Mike's body to the shoreline and put him in the back of his car before pushing the boat back out onto the water. He then drove back home and got into bed with his wife Kathy, who was still asleep. Later, he drove to a Walmart where he bought a shovel. He then drove to a remote area and buried Mike. Brian said that over the years, Denise spoke little of Mike, almost pretending it didn't happen and denying any part in it. As Brian and Denise's relationship began to go south, Brian became paranoid and the fear of Denise turning him into the authorities was at the forefront of his mind all the time. When he held her at gunpoint in the car that day, he said he had made her swear to never tell anyone about Mike and take their secret to the grave. A day after his confession, he told police where they could find Mike's remains at the end of Gardner Road in northern Leon County. It was desolate, remote, quiet, and just 5 miles from where Mike had grown up. Good afternoon. I'm Special Agent in Charge Mark Perez with the Tallahassee Regional Operations Center. After years of interviews, forensic, and investigative analysis, we finally got the break that we needed. Standing here now, I can tell you that we know what happened to Mike Williams. He was murdered. After receiving new information, FDLE's crime scene unit and special agents spent days conducting an extensive search at an undisclosed location. That search led to the recovery of human remains, and FDLE's crime laboratory analysts confirmed through DNA analysis that the human remains are those of Mike Williams. Now that we have recovered the remains of Mike Williams and have additional forensic evidence, our focus has shifted to bringing those responsible for his death to justice. And we will not stop until that is done. 5 months later, authorities arrived at Denise Winchester's office and she was placed under arrest. This fell on Ansley's 19th birthday. Denise was indicted on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and accessory after the fact. Good morning. Would you tell us your name, please? Denise Williams. Good morning, Miss Williams. Miss Williams, if you're not aware, but I'm sure Mr. Way has informed you, there was an indictment for conspiracy to commit murder first degree, murder of the first degree and accessory after the fact. Ms. Williams was indicted for murder of first degree. These are all punishable by life offenses. For right now, however, I am going to hold you no bond. Mr. Fox, what's the state's recommendation as to anything else that I need to do? No, Your Honor. She's being held without bond, so there's nothing further to be done. All right, Miss Williams, did you have any questions about anything? No. All right, that will conclude your first appearance. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Her legal team said that Brian was nothing more than a jilted ex-husband and because of the plea deal, he could essentially make up anything he wanted and get away with it. Being held without bond right now, Brian Winchester's doing 20 years down and will call a CI. So, it appears you get a homicide, you get a 20-year sentence. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're going to fight it and we're going to get acquitted. And he flipped. Well, I don't know what he flipped. I think he made something up. That's the big difference between flipping and fiction. Got to go. Brian, Cheryl, and Brian's ex-wife, Kathy, all testified. I think it was gradual that we, the more we were together, the more we wanted to be together. And the more we griped about Kathy and Mike, the more we wanted to be together. It just got worse and worse. It just snowballed. I don't even know how to describe it. So, yes, we eventually started talking about options and ways that we could be together. And Denise, because of the way she was raised, because of her pride, I guess I can't say all the reasons, but she did not want to get divorced and stated that she would not get divorced, but she still had a desire for us to be together, which narrowed the options even further. I guess. I'm not going to sit here and say that Denise planned everything. And, I was just a dumb guy who went along with what she wanted to do. I mean, I instigated a lot of it. I helped come up with ideas. I planned a lot of things, but overall, it was very mutual. I mean, we wanted to be together and we weren't going to let anything stop that. So, over the year and a half prior to Mike's death, we discussed several options and alternatives of ways that we could be together. So, that never happened. That never happened. That was part of being the confidential source. That's how we're getting everything to bring up the subject. Correct. To bring up the subject, correct, for me to talk to her and say, I have received this subpoena. I'm going to have to talk about this. And this conversation is us talking about what I'm going to be saying in that supposed subpoena, because I know they're wanting to talk to me about Mike. Don't know anything. And I do. No. What do you know? Well, Brian called me at the shop crying, and before I'm mad, but Brian had figured out that you were cheating on him with Chuck, and he just told me about Mike. What did he say? Well, I would love to know what happened to Mike. They said they found his remains and that he was beaten or that he was shot. Brian told me that y'all planned it. When the article came out in the newspaper, Denise called me on the phone. She was livid. She said, "You and Nick need to come over here right now." We went to her house in the front yard. We weren't even invited. Inside, she was screaming at me. She was mad about the article. And she said, screaming at me, "I don't ever want to hear Mike's name again. I don't ever want to see Mike's picture in the paper again. I don't ever want to know anything you're doing about Mike again. I have to get on with my life." After 3 days of evidence, it was down to the jury. Are we ready for the jury? Yes, Your Honor. State of Florida versus Denise Williams. We the jury find as follows. Count 1 of the indictments. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. As to count 2, we the jury find the defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. We the jury find as follows. As to count 3 of the indictment, the defendant is guilty of accessory after the fact of first-degree murder. It's been dated and signed by the foreperson. Mized, did I accurately reflect the verdict of the jury? In February 2019, Denise was sentenced to life in prison. I had to find him and bring him home. Judge Hankinson. For the next 17 years, I made telephone calls, put up missing person signs, compiled my notes into a book, and had people post on social media for me. With the help of friends, we raised money, and put up billboards. I bought ads in the Tallahassee Democrat and worked with the Twin City News, asking everyone to help me find Mike. They told me Mike drowned and got eaten by alligators, and there was no need for an investigation. They laughed at me and called me crazy. Judge Hankinson, I am a fighter, not a victim. I love Ansley, but Mike was my son. I became even more determined to find the truth. There is no manual to tell a mother what to do when her child goes missing. I just did what God put on my heart to do. Judge Hankinson. For the rest of my life, when I try to sleep at night, I will see my son clinging to a tree stump and legs in the dark, knowing that his best friend is trying to kill him. I hear his voice screaming for help. I wasn't there to help him. It will haunt me forever. In conclusion, Judge Hankinson, we are in this courtroom today because of God, not Cheryl Williams. I am Mike's mother and I did what God told me to do. My son's horrific death demands justice. With today's sentencing of Denise Mariel Williams Winchester, I believe justice will have been served. Thank you. Her team quickly lodged an appeal. The judges agreed with Denise's lawyers, and in 2020, they overturned the murder conviction. They said the prosecution failed to show she was a principal to the crime. However, the conspiracy to commit murder conviction was upheld and she was resentenced. She gave a statement herself, as did Cheryl. Denise was resentenced to 30 years and will have to serve 85% of that sentence before she is eligible for parole. Brian is eligible for parole in 2034 and he will be 63 years old. A funeral could finally be held for Mike, and Cheryl said she wanted everyone to be there, even extending the welcome to family and friends of both Denise and Brian. Cheryl said every year for her granddaughter's birthday, despite not getting a response, she takes out a little ad in the paper for her, hoping she'll see it and reach out. As well as losing her father at just 18 months old, Ansley has essentially lost her mother, too. She believes in her mother's innocence and said, Cheryl Williams is a remarkable woman who was relentless in her search for answers for her son. She has compiled 27 pages of notes and evidence, and written to the governor of Florida every single day for 9 years. She vowed to never give up until someone took her seriously. Mike Williams was a kind, hard-working man who everyone said put his family on a pedestal. His life came to a terrible and terrifying end, and it took almost 20 years to get justice, but his family made sure it happened for him. Story 3. This case takes us to the small New Mexico town of El Rancho, home to just 1,500 people. It's a close-knit community full of honest and hard-working families where everyone knows everyone. In 2011, it was home to the well-respected and loved Ortiz family. Mom Dixie, Dad Lloyd, their daughters Cher and Angela, and their son Stephen. Lloyd and Dixie had been married for 34 years, and were described as pillars of the community. Angela said that Dixie and Lloyd were the best parents in so many ways. They never judged, always accepted people for who they were, worked harder than anyone she knew, and supported everyone else as well. Lloyd was a tile contractor. He was usually up before the sun rose and didn't often stop working until after 9 at night. Dixie worked in a nursing home. Something she didn't see or describe as work. She just genuinely loved helping people. In 1989, when Angela and Cher were teenagers, Dixie and Lloyd met 7-month-old Stephen and instantly fell in love with him. They soon adopted him, and his sisters said their family felt so perfect and complete. Stephen had cerebral palsy and his left side was paralyzed. The family were told that it was a tough road ahead. He may never be able to walk or talk and would need assistance with a lot of things in life. Through immense hard work, both physically and mentally, lots of love and encouragement, Stephen overcame everything doctors said he never would. He was soon walking and talking, as well as reaching huge developmental milestones. The family would attend church, and Stephen was always the star of the show. His pastor said he would walk in and greet every single person there. He was a joy to be around and everyone adored him. 2/3 of the Ortiz family home was occupied by Dixie, Lloyd and Stephen, and Sherry and her husband Jesse and their 2 children lived in the other part of the home, which was separated by a fence for the family that had always been so close. This was the perfect living arrangement. June 18, 2011. Sherry and Jesse spent some time at the casino before coming home and watching a film. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, Sherry and Jesse heard a noise outside and the dog started barking. Jesse got up, grabbed his gun, and looked outside. He saw a gray car driving away and heard someone shouting, "Hurry up! Let's go!" He got in his truck and followed the car for a while before losing it. He then drove back home, and the family went to sleep, thinking, although it was odd, it was likely just teenagers messing around. Several hours later, June 19, Father's Day. Sherry had made some enchiladas for her dad for Father's Day. She walked over to the house and let herself in. 911. Where is your emergency? Emergency. Call 911. Okay, coming. That's what happened. Okay, I'll call 911. Sherry, when you're yelling, turn up the yelling to the phone. I can't understand you. They're dead. They have a gunshot wound to the head. They're dead. 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 They've been dead since the morning. When investigators arrived on scene, they discovered Dixie in the master bedroom in her pajamas with trauma to her head. Lloyd was found in the backyard and had sustained 7 injuries to his head and torso. 21-year-old Stephen was dead on the kitchen floor. It was clear that he had tried hard to fight off his killer, but he was struck 17 times in total and succumbed to his injuries. I walked in and I was like, "Mom." And then I walked over to her to shake her and her ******ing head was blown. And so I ran to the kitchen to check for my brother and my dad. And I thought it was my dad laying on the floor in his underwear because his face was so ******ing blown off. And so I ran home screaming for my husband. And my husband went back and he said, "Honey, that's Stephen in the kitchen. Your dad's dead in the backyard." I started to run toward her and that's when I saw a hole in her close to her temple and dried blood down her face. The ferocity and level of rage that the perpetrator had was shocking to everyone there. One officer said it was the worst crime scene he had ever been called to. Everyone in the community was frightened and shaken. Things like this just didn't happen, and the fact that a family like The Ortizes had been subjected to this, left everyone fearing that their families could be next. The names of the 3 people found dead in the small New Mexico village of El Rancho. A relative found the 3 people shot to death late last night in the family home. News 13's Dave Romero is live from the state police headquarters in Santa Fe with the very latest. David, Diana, State Police say they're still trying to piece together if this was a homicide or a murder-suicide. Now, the 3 victims are 55-year-old Lloyd Ortiz, his wife, 53-year-old Dixie Ortiz, and their son, 21-year-old Stephen Ortiz. All 3 were found dead in the home behind the one you see on the screen right now. This is off of Coral Street in El Rancho, which is 5 miles west of Pawaiki. State police have been on the scene since the 911 call came in last night around 7 p.m. At this point, state police can only say that the victims died of gunshot wounds, but can't confirm if there was forced entry into the home or how many times the victims were shot. It's now a matter of interviewing other family members and neighbors in the area. We're still unsure as to what happened out there. The guys are still working very hard to determine what exactly happened, but at this point, we still don't know. And Sergeant Johnson said he expects that investigators will stay out there for at least a number of hours longer. Deanna, back to you. Lloyd's wallet was on the kitchen counter next to Stephen's body, but it was still full of money. So, initially, it seemed that robbery was not a motive. There was no DNA of an outsider inside the family home, and police knew they were up against it unless they could find the murder weapon. At the back of the property, behind a locked fence, were several marijuana plants. Angela and Sherry explained that their parents had a medical marijuana card for Stephen as well as a license to grow it for him. After 2 brain surgeries, Stephen had been prescribed it to ease his constant and very debilitating headaches. Authorities wondered if the wrong person had found the plants and broken in to try and steal them rather than the money or valuables inside. But it soon came to light that Lloyd and Dixie had a secret safe hidden at the back of their closet. A safe so secret even their children didn't know about it, and this presented more motives still. First it was suspicious, but now state police say the family found dead in their El Rancho home was murdered. They aren't releasing many other details beyond that, and that has neighbors living in fear. News 13's Amanda Goodman is live in the Newsplex with more. While Jessica, all the people I spoke with say they can't understand why this family would have been killed. That, coupled with the fact that a killer is still out there, has everyone concerned. A triple homicide obviously, rocks a community, and this has rocked them to the point of silence. Neighbors here are so freaked out they didn't want to go on camera or even be identified for fear of what could happen to them. A lot of their fears stems from the fact that none of them can understand why this family would be murdered. By all accounts, the Ortizes were good neighbors and good people. I can't speak on the specifics, who to look out for. As far as I know, we haven't identified any suspects yet. The autopsy results soon came in. The wounds were so deep that everyone initially thought it was a gun at point blank range, but the results later revealed that the family had been killed with a pickaxe. Sherry said when she and her husband had heard someone outside that early morning, Jesse had jumped into his truck and started following the car. But Jesse's first story contradicted this, and he told officers he only went and stood outside He didn't follow anyone. He then changed his story and said he might have missed that part out. Officers definitely found this odd, as it was a pretty big thing to forget, and they wondered if Jesse had more to tell them. Jesse admitted that he and Lloyd had argued on occasion, but he said it was all over stupid and petty things and they were forgotten as soon as they happened. Authorities couldn't rule anything out, though. No matter how small something seemed, there could always be more to it. New this morning, the first images of a family murdered in a small community north of Santa Fe. This is the Ortiz family. Lloyd Ortiz, his wife Dixie, and their adult son Stephen were found dead in their El Rancho home over a week ago. The Office of the Medical Examiner says all three died from blunt force trauma to the head. Investigators have still not named a suspect or a motive in this case. Lloyd Ortiz owned his own tile company and his wife Dixie was an activities director here at this Los Alamos nursing home. Her co-workers say she had such a big heart and was a fierce advocate for the elderly, and she brought that joy every day. Every day she will be so sadly missed. They searched Jesse and Sherry's part of the home. Nothing came back forensically, and the CCTV from the casino also lined up. With this, police were officially able to rule out Jesse and Sherry as playing any part in the deaths, hoping the killer had just dumped the pickaxe somewhere near the home. Authorities were looking everywhere for the murder weapon. And remarkably, they found it just a short distance away in a field near the Ortiz family home. It weighed 5 pounds and was still covered in blood. Praying this would be an open and shut case very soon, they sent it off for testing. But sadly, the only DNA that came back was from Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen. There was nothing else on it. We're uncertain what we have, and until we get a break, we're not going to know. Angela told the police that there was one person they might want to talk to, a 16-year-old called Nicholas Ortiz. There was no relation between him and the Ortiz family, but he was close with Sherry's son, and the pair would hang out at school. He went to the same church as the family, and his pastor said he was helpful, always staying late to tidy up, and friendly. After frequent bouts of difficulty, volatility, and fighting at home, Sherry offered a room to him, hoping it would help and give him some stability. Nicholas would also spend time at Lloyd and Dixie, and they treated him well, often driving him around whenever he needed a lift and cooking him dinner. But this all changed when Sherry and Jesse noticed money was going missing before walking in on Nicholas going through their things. Instead of asking him to leave, they saw it as a cry for help and decided to give him money for the contributions he was making around the home, hoping this would stop the stealing. But Nicholas's attitude got worse, and his behavior was making Lloyd and Dixie more and more uncomfortable. After finding him hiding in the garden after jumping over the fence, eventually Lloyd told him to leave the family alone and go back to his parents' house. Nicholas was found and questioned. He left up a trust with them, not to go near them anymore. "We think it's okay, man. So, you guys want to leave?" That was really the last time we spoke. "Do you think if you found out who did that?" "If I found out who did it, I would call the police, right?" He appeared honest and open about everything, including the tension between them all when he was asked to leave the house. As well as this, he said he was at home that night. He woke up his dad to wish him a happy Father's day just after midnight and saw his mom off to work at 7 a.m. This was corroborated by the family and the police continued their searches. Time was slipping away fast. It's really hard when this holiday comes around because, it brings back that memory of when I got that phone call, and it's the last thing that anybody ever wants to hear. And before long, it was almost Christmas 2012. The Ortiz family murders was among the state's most disturbing unsolved cases, and police were worrying that with no DNA evidence, it might remain a cold case forever. But one call would finally come in that changed everything. A woman, currently serving time in prison, told police she had information on what had happened to Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen. She told law enforcement that there was a reason for the lack of evidence. She actually knew the attacker and he had been wearing socks over his hands at the time of the assault. This caller was 24-year-old Ashley Royal. She had a string of convictions including burglary and drugs-related charges. She claimed that on the night of the murders, she was smoking weed with her cousin Jose, who was 15 at the time, and his friend, none other than Nicholas Ortiz. Jose and Nicholas decided they needed more money, so they hatched a plan to steal from the Ortiz family. Nicholas was somehow aware of the safe in the family home and was out to steal $20,000 from it. As well as this, he said he wanted to steal the plants, too. Ashley drove them to a road near the Ortiz family residence at around 3 a.m. She then drove home. Ashley said she was in a gray car, a car similar to the one Jesse said he had seen driving that early morning. 45 minutes later at 3:45, she got a call from Jose. He said he had panicked last minute and couldn't go through with it. He could hear dogs barking and some families were still awake. And although Nicholas had tried to convince him, he refused. He watched as Nicholas walked up to the back door and knocked. Jose said he realized the gravity of the situation and ran and hid behind the house. After this, Nicholas called Ashley, telling her she needed to pick him up from outside the Ortiz's house. As soon as the pair got in the car, it was obvious that something horrific had happened. He had blood on his trousers, a sock on his right hand, and had been bag-tied around his right leg. He was in a panic, saying over and over, "I messed up. I killed them." Ashley said she drove him to her grandparents' house so he could take a shower. His bloody clothes were put in a bag and disposed of, and he was given new clothes to walk home in. The next day, Nicholas called Ashley saying he'd killed the family with a pickaxe before discarding it outside the house. But officers did have questions. Not only did Nicholas appear to have an alibi, the car in question had been sold on and later crushed at a scrapyard. 18 months had now passed since Father's Day 2011, and the vehicle was long gone. The murder is still a mystery, exactly 2 years after a family was killed at their El Rancho home. Action 7 News reporter Lana Grimstead has continuing coverage on whether police have any clue as to killed 3 people in northern New Mexico. It is the most important case in the state police books right now. Still, an active, ongoing, but unsolved homicide investigation. A lot of times cases cannot solve themselves within a day. And unfortunately, this is a case that's requiring a lot more resources and some time. But as time goes by, family members of the victims are starting to lose faith in the police investigation, and they can't shake the Fear that the killer is still out there. State police say they continue following many leads, but won't comment on any specifics or say if they have any suspects in mind. Investigators say they are bringing in outside agencies to help, but won't say who or how. They started looking into the only thing that had lasted over the years: phone records. Records showed a lot of communication going back and forth between the three of them that night in June 2011. They called in Nicholas again and asked him about the text messages. He quickly asked to stop the interview. Over the next few months, they continued building their case. And 3 years after the killings in 2014, officers turned their attention to Jose to get his side of the story. He told them the same story as Ashley. Eric Zubia, another one of Nicholas's friends, became the third person to tell the officers the same thing. He said Nicholas had said he had killed people, but would not specify who. It was only when he heard about the Ortiz family, he thought he had connected the dots. He went straight to the police 2 days later, but the full story was still unknown. And although this was logged, it still took a long time to obtain an arrest warrant. But that day finally came on February 12, 2015. The community was shocked and scared when the bodies of a couple and their son were found in their home murdered with a pickaxe. They were worried the case was going cold, but today police say they've made an arrest. And now there's questions about why a teen would want an entire family dead. People I spoke with at a basketball game here at Pawaka Valley High School tonight feel a mix of relief and shock that a member of their own community is now in custody. Today, they announced they've arrested 20-year-old Nick Ortiz for the triple murder. News 13 has learned although he shares the same last name, he is not related to the family. State police have released few details as to how he knew them or a possible motive. For the small community, it's the news they've waited for nearly 4 years, but it was met with mixed emotion. I went to school with him. I think people are more shocked than they are relieved. Nicholas Ortiz was placed under arrest with 5 charges against him. When he was read out the charges, he said, "I don't agree with 2 of them." The detective recalled it was very telling that the only 2 he didn't agree with had nothing to do with murder. And he said this was as close to a confession as he could get. Sherry, Jesse, and Angela were in a state of shock. The teenager they had taken in as their own, fed, given money to and a bed to sleep in, had turned on them all in such an unimaginable way. He was initially denied bail, but this was changed to $100,000, which was made, and he was let out. Murder in northern New Mexico is now out on bond. In June 2015, his trial began. Today, the accused killer's attorney zeroed in on the couple's daughter. News 13's Marissa Lucero is in Santa Fe with the story. Marissa. Yeah. Kim. The defense spent a good portion of the day questioning the Ortiz's daughter, Cher Ortiz Rios. They questioned her about her relationship with her mom, dad, and brother, but she insisted there was no turmoil or bad blood within the family. They were amazing. Amazing. We had a big family camping trip planned for July 4th leading up to July 4th. We had like a 9-day camping trip planned and were so excited about it. Prosecutors also called Sherry's husband, Jesse Rios, onto the stand to recall the days leading up to the murder and the night He found his in-laws murdered. The defense is now questioning Jesse Rios, and this trial is expected to last into next week. Back to you. Both Ashley and Jose were set to testify against him in exchange for plea deals. Ashley pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated burglary and tampering with evidence and was given 20 years in prison with 6 years of her sentence suspended. So, she will remain in prison for 14 years unless she gets parole any earlier. Jose was given full immunity and was never charged with any crimes. Although he was a minor at the time of the murders, given how disturbing the crime scene was, the district attorney fought for him to be tried as an adult, which allowed for them to push for a higher sentence if he was found guilty. To everyone's surprise, in the middle of the proceedings, Jose changed his testimony. He said that Ashley was the ringleader and she had instructed both him and Nicholas to rob the home and kill the family. He said she gave them socks to cover up their hands and plastic bags for their feet and gave Nicholas the pickaxe. Nicholas didn't take the stand the entire trial, leaving Ashley and Jose with opposite statements, fighting against each other. After 3 days of deliberations, the jury was stuck. They hadn't reached a verdict on any counts, and they simply couldn't agree. A mistrial was declared. Everyone thought that the case was as strong as it could possibly be, but it meant that a new trial would have to take place, leaving the family to go through it all again. The case went back to trial 17 months later. And this time, there was a very different result. Nicholas Ortiz was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of aggravated burglary with a deadly weapon, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit aggravated burglary with a deadly weapon. Sherry started a petition begging the judge to give Nicholas 3 consecutive life sentences. Prosecutors or the victim's family was hoping for. But Nicholas Ortiz will be going to prison for 25 years, and finally this case is over. News 3's Rebecca Atkins says more on what the district attorney has to say about the sentence. Rebecca. Okay. The victim's family's surviving daughter wanted her family's killer to be sentenced as an adult with no possibility of parole, and prosecutors were asking he be put away for nearly 3/4 of a century. But a judge didn't seem to agree with that sentence. So, Nicholas Ortiz got 3 25-year sentences, 1 for each murder. The judge, instead of stacking them one on top of each other, he's writing them all at the same time. He's writing them concurrently. He got credit for time served since his first arrest and was required to serve 85% of his sentence. Nicholas filed an appeal, but it was denied. It's possible he could be out of prison in his early 40s, being able to apply for parole in late 2036 or early 2037. Angela said it was hard to feel like any closure had been gained and any justice had been served. His debt will never be paid. It doesn't matter how much time he has. It's never going to be paid because I can't get my family back. I honestly don't feel like he got enough time. He took 3 lives. 3. And they're far more worth 25 years. To be completely blunt, I truly feel for his family. I really do. They had no part in this, the district attorney said. While he was disappointed, he was happy that it had been categorized as a serious violent offense. The community of El Rancho and the family and friends of Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen will forever be affected by what happened back in June 2011. Sherry and Angela waited more than 8 years to get justice for them. But they are still left feeling that justice simply didn't happen. Hardworking, giving, and doing everything they could for everyone they met, the deaths of Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz was and will always be a huge loss to the community and everyone that knew them. It is only right that they be remembered for the joy and happiness they brought to so many people and not by the tragic way that they left this earth. Story 4. July 1st, 2000. It's a hot summer's day in West Sussex, England. 4 young siblings are outside playing hide and seek in a cornfield near their grandparents' home by the coast. A short while later, a 999 call is made to police. That caller is Sarah Payne, and her daughter Sarah did not come home with her brothers and sister. 2 hours later, the police launch a major investigation into the young girl's disappearance. This would fast turn into a huge and massively publicized nationwide hunt to find 8-year-old Sarah Payne. Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne was the third of 4 children. Her mom, Sarah, said she was the imagination of the family, all pixies and fairies and dolls. She was very much a girl around her family. She was full of energy, lively, and playful. But Sarah said she could be quite timid with others. Sarah had a big heart, was kind, caring, and considerate, loving nothing more than going to school and playing with her siblings. On the first weekend of July, the Payne family decided to visit Michael's father and stepmother, Lacey and Terry, in West Sussex. It was the peak of summer, and they lived by the coast with plenty of space outside for the kids to play. On the evening of July 1st, the family ate dinner together before they took a walk down to the coastline. After this, the children, having so much fun, asked to stay out and play. Michael and Sarah put the oldest brother Lee in charge, and they went to play in the cornfield just meters from their grandparents' house. Sarah, Michael, and Terry took a stroll themselves. They soon headed back home, wanting to settle in for the evening and get the children into bed. As soon as they approached the house, they realized something was wrong. 13-year-old Lee, 12-year-old Luke, and 6-year-old Charlotte were stood outside with Leslie, but Sarah was not. Leslie was clutching Charlotte's hand tightly, panicked, and asked, "Have you got Sarah?" "No," they tentatively said. The children said that Sarah had fallen over and hit her head while playing. She then ran off crying, heading for a gap in the harvest with the intent of going back to the house. Her oldest brother, Lee, turned around for a split second and lost sight of her. The children had looked for her for a few minutes before they knew they needed to get home. Everyone started running around the fields and beach, gathering neighbors along the way who wanted to help. Local people have joined police officers to search the fields and woods around where Sarah Payne went missing. Sarah had been playing outside with her younger sister and 2 older brothers when they became separated. Once separated from the other children, police believe she may have become lost. They say there's no evidence to suggest that she's been abducted. As soon as the search started, it became clear that this was not simply a child that had run off and become lost. This was not in Sarah's nature, and everyone knew it. So named Operation Naple, everyone was invested in joining in the search, doing anything and everything they could to help. By all accounts, from everyone that lived there and knew the place, it was a very safe area. There was little traffic, lots of countryside, and all the houses were very separated, but everyone knew each other. One reporter said it was more a place where wealthy holiday makers would rent out little seaside cottages. There was no trouble there. It's possible if she'd moved some distance that she could still be hidden somewhere, but we do have to consider there is a growing possibility that she has been abducted. Time is still of the essence, and for that reason, we are prioritizing that line of inquiry. We've got to apply them as actionable measures. There's a variety of different jobs that we're going to have to do in trying to find Sarah. The last place she was seen had one road in and one road out. The reporter said, "You really have to have a reason to need to go down there." The police hit the ground running, and along with volunteers in the area, they started searching. But there was simply no evidence to be found. None of her clothing and nothing she dropped on the way. There were no leads and no clues anywhere. As the police started taking more detailed statements, Lee told his mother he had seen something, but didn't know if he should say or not. After encouraging him to tell her anything, no matter how small, he said that he had seen a white van on the road. He said the driver was a scruffy man and he had smiled at him and waved as he had gone past. He remembered and watched the van speed off so fast the tires were screeching against the ground. Lee said he was just seconds behind her, meters away. He gave a description of the van and the man inside. Authorities started going door to door and questioning known pedophiles in the area. Over the next 48 hours, 2 arrests were made, but both times they were swiftly released. Michael and Sarah were making every appeal they could, and every media outlet was running Sarah's story. "Thanks for coming to the press conference, Sarah. What can we say that we haven't already said, except that we are so determined to find Sarah? We'd like you to introduce you to Sarah's teddy. He doesn't have a name yet. Sarah will name him when she comes home. I have some letters from the brothers and sisters that I'd like to read out. Please bear with me on this. If you're reading this, please come home. We'll miss you and we won't be back. We will find you no matter what it takes. And we have a big surprise for you when you come home." I can't imagine what Sarah means to us. We're a strong family and we don't survive well apart. We need a home now. Today, as quickly as we possibly can. Somebody out there must have seen her. They must have seen her on that road. They must have seen her. Sarah was spearheading the media campaign, making sure everyone was talking about and looking for her daughter. She wouldn't hear any talk of her daughter being anything other than alive and well, and always addressed Sarah directly in the appeals, telling her she would be safe and back home soon. Look at all these people looking for you and your flowers. Look, Sarah, we sent you flowers. You'll be home soon, darling. Oh, we promise you you'll be home soon. You really will. Let her go. Let her go. If you know that someone's got an extra child somehow or whatever, get in touch with your local police, you know. Look around you, everybody. Everybody, just look around you. We're trying to stay as positive as we possibly can, you know. And Sarah, if you're watching, Mommy loves you and we miss you and we're looking for you, darling. And we're going to find you. Okay. We're going to find you. And you'll be home. You'll be home, darling. Yeah. I'm still hopeful. We've got to try and keep her spirits up in some way. She's alive. The picture of Sarah wearing her red school uniform became a famous and widely circulated picture, one many will remember seeing in the papers and on the news to this very day. But with nothing turning up, the military was soon brought in as well. Everyone was making appeals, including the pop group Steps, Sarah's favorite band. Reconstructions were put out, and before long, Sarah's case had become the biggest in Sussex Police's history. After the appeals and reconstructions, thousands of leads came in, and every single one needed to be looked into. Someone believed they saw Sarah with a man at a service station, getting fuel. The girl was in the toilets crying and saying her name was Sarah, but this lead turned out to be false. Another witness said she had seen what looked like a white transit van come hurtling down the road that day. The same van that Lee described seeing that evening. This lead had a lot more weight to it. Your 11-year-old Luke asked to say a few words to his younger sister. Sarah, if you're watching, please come home. Family's not the same without you. There's just a massive gap in between everybody. Our little princess has been not with us for 2 whole weeks now. We miss her terribly. Every day gets a little bit harder. It was now more than 2 weeks since Sarah was last seen, and family liaison officers arrived at the family home with terrible news. For the missing 8-year-old Sarah Payne have found the body of a little girl in West Sussex. In a Sussex field tonight, police are examining the body of a little girl found just 10 miles from where Sarah Payne went missing at the beginning of the night. Found just 10 miles from the home of the missing 8-year-old Sarah Payne. Continued by forensic teams. They've been gathering evidence and DNA samples which are being sent off for analysis. The body of a little girl had been found by a farm worker. She was naked and buried in a shallow grave. Her body was severely decomposed and had been attacked by animals. As the liaison officer Sean was telling Michael and Sarah to prepare for the worst, the media was already publicizing the story, and Sarah's brother and sister came running outside asking their parents if it was true. Testing confirmed it was Sarah Payne's body. Sean offered to go and see her first. When he returned to the house, Sarah said he was the shadow of the man who had left the house that day, and she said, looking at how broken he was, she knew she couldn't face seeing her little girl like that. What I can confirm with you now is, as a result of the post-mortem that was carried out in the early hours of this morning, this is now a murder inquiry. The second thing that you will obviously be wishing to anticipate is that we have been able to identify that the body in the field half a mile from here is Sarah Payne's. The pathologist said that Sarah had suffered a violent death, and it was probably asphyxia in a sexually motivated attack, but due to the decomposition, it was impossible to determine any injuries. Crime Watch soon ran a story, too. Appeals from all across the country. And with your help, we hope some criminals are about to be caught, like the killer of Sarah Payne. Here's the man who is running perhaps the highest profile investigation in the country, Peter Kennan. The stretch of the 829 where Sarah was buried is a very nondescript road. It's that part that is between the Brinsbury Agricultural College and the Toad Cafe. On that Saturday evening at about 11 o'clock, a lorry driver who was driving a 7.5-ton on curtain-sided truck could well have seen the murderer of Sarah Payne. A vehicle pulled out from the exact spot where Sarah had been buried and it caused this lorry driver to brake sharply to avoid it. There's little doubt in my mind that the murderer had just buried Sarah. That driver could have also taken the registration number of the car down. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful? It's possible that the killer of Sarah may well have been driving in the area. 1. Particular location that is of interest is the Texaco garage at Buck Barn, which is at the junction of the A24 and the A272. I appeal to any witnesses that were in the area at that time. Did you see a man that was nervous, agitated, sweating, perhaps dirty from having dug a grave? Did you see him in a vehicle? If you did, please contact the program. It's vital that we speak to you. I've got photographs of her from birth right up to just before she went missing, I think. I mean, she loved dressing up. She loved writing little notes to everybody. And the last note she wrote to us before she went out that door was Mrs. L. Payne. She just thought, I love you so much. There is somebody out there who knows what happened to Sarah. They know. And I plead with all my heart with him to get in contact. Please don't let it happen to another little girl. Peter, it must be a hugely emotional inquiry for you and the team, as was the reconstruction. The first time I saw that was yesterday at a briefing down in Littlehampton Police Station. The entire team were there, 40 detectives. As soon as that started, you could have heard a pin drop. I was not the only person to have tears in my eyes and dabbing them with a handkerchief. It does highlight the bravery of Terry Payne and particularly the Payne family, who have been absolutely marvelous throughout this entire inquiry. Now, there have been all sorts of strange sightings as well. I know that there's one bonfire in particular you're trying to find out more about. Yes, there was some hardboard and MDF wood that was on a bonfire which had been taken from a van. It was there for 3 days. The bonfire wasn't lit and the wood was taken. Salvaged. I mean, probably salvaged. Yes. So, you want whoever salvaged that plywood or whatever it was to let you know where is that wood now. It might be connected. It might have forensic clues on it. Of course. And if it did come from a van, somebody would have refitted the interior of a van or a vehicle like a van on the 1st or 2nd of July. Yes. In that Littlehampton, Angering, Rustington area. So, anybody was asked to do that, please call. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. There's a substantial reward as well. 150,000. So, please, any way that you can help this, but leave this to the Sussex area, please. And try and be specific about calls. Please ring us in the studio on our free phone number. A lady came forward and told police that she had seen a shoe at the side of the road near to where Sarah's body was found. This was the lead they were looking for. The shoe was collected and they started searching that area for more clues. Detectives circled back around to a man they had spoken to just a day after Sarah went missing, convicted pedophile, 41-year-old Roy Whiting. Roy was described as a loner and an outcast. He had a string of past convictions and he had given them a false alibi. He had scratches to his body and answered no comments to everything he was asked. How far away from there were you in your vehicle when you first saw her? No. What side of the road was she walking on? No comment. At what stage did you decide that you were going to take her? No comment. I mean, was it a planned thing? Or was it an instantaneous act? What was it, Roy? No comment. Is there anything that you don't understand about what I've asked you over the past few days? Roy Whiting was suspect number 1. Back in 1995, Roy had abducted and sexually assaulted an 8-year-old girl in Coley. He was arrested and sentenced to 4 years in prison. A psychiatrist assessed him and said that he was likely to reoffend once released and could possibly even kill his next victim. He was released after serving just half of his sentence. And in 1997, he became one of the first people in Britain to go on the newly launched Sex Offenders Register. He moved to Littlehampton on the West Sussex coast and started renting a flat just miles from where Sarah was last seen. As he was on the Sex Offenders Register and lived in the area, he was one of the first people to be questioned in Sarah's case. When the police went to his flat, he said he was out all day at a fair 21 miles away. His flat was forensically searched, but nothing turned up. And with this, the officers left. They did, however, keep him under surveillance over the next few weeks, monitoring everything he did and everywhere he went. At one point during the surveillance, police saw him get into a white van, a van they didn't know he owned. They asked him to step out and did a quick search. It turned out he had purchased the van just a week before Sarah was last seen. Inside, they found a receipt for fuel that was purchased on the day Sarah went missing, and this completely exposed his alibi. Other items in the van included children's blankets and toys. Sarah's body was discovered within 3 miles of the service station where Roy had bought the fuel and near to his flat, but there was still insufficient evidence to charge him. What had drawn police to Roy Whiting for a second time was that he had stolen a car and taken off. Police chased him at about 70 mph before he crashed a roundabout reverting north. One male in it. Vehicles now going south. London Road on the northbound carriageway. Going south past the BP garage. Gone down to the back of Allied Carpets. We're into a car park. Keep going. Cut the back end. County Oak Industrial Estate. It's going right. 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 Right into an unmade road. Here we go. It's going down to the back of Langley Walk. Back of Langley Walk. We have a warning light come off on our car. We believe it might be damaged. We may have to call off as followed. We're going north. North. Speed is 70 mph. We have our lights on. Vehicle is refusing to stop. He was arrested for theft and dangerous driving. And this gave them more time to question him. About Sarah again. Police believe that no matter how well he thought he had covered it all up, Roy Whiting was behind what had happened to Sarah Payne. But he still wasn't talking and was released pending his court date for the car theft. One of the officers leading the investigation said something about Sarah's abduction and death. Touched a nerve throughout the body of the United Kingdom. I think since that time, there's been some really notable cases that have followed suit, but this was really the very first that was so enormous in the eyes of the public, he recalled. A funeral was finally held for Sarah. Sarah said when they buried her, they gave her the funeral a princess should have because she could never give her the wedding a princess should have. Sarah said she owed it to the public and everyone that had been there supporting, searching, and appealing since July. It's very hard when the entire country has ownership of your daughter. She said, you want to go away to a little corner and just mourn and deal with life. But knowing how much this meant to everyone else, many a mourner flocked to say goodbye to Sarah. I didn't know what to write, so I just wrote to Sarah. Dear Sarah, ever since you came bounding into our lives at 2 o'clock in the morning, with no phone in the house, one tooth in your head, and a smile that could melt ice, we loved you. You were a joy that made our lives full. Daddy called you princess because that's just what you are. Sarah and Michael believed early on that Sarah had been snatched and killed by a sex offender, although they had no idea who. Sarah started channeling her energy into researching the laws on sex offenders, and they vowed that they would change the system. When the News of the World newspaper gave their backing, too, they all started calling on law enforcement to adopt the British version of what is known as Megan's Law in America. This law would require police to make information about known local sex offenders available to the public. It would allow parents, carers, or guardians to formally ask the police for information about a person who has had contact with their child or a child close to them if they are concerned the person poses a risk. A decision was made to publish the names and faces of 50 pedophiles convicted of offenses against children in the News of the World. It was an extremely controversial decision. Critics accused the newspaper of inciting vigilante justice. There were many attacks off the back of this, but things got confused and people that shared the same names as those in the paper found themselves attacked. More than 1 million people signed the petition to make Sarah's law happen. In September 2000, 2 months after Sarah went missing, Roy Whiting pleaded guilty to stealing the car, and he was sentenced to 22 months in prison. 22 months gave police a substantial amount of time to forensically analyze as much as they could and build a good case against Roy. They started running tests on his van. The van was made to carry furniture and was full of plywood that went around the inside. The plywood was easy to strip out and burn, and it was clear that any evidence that may have been inside could be long gone. But the fear of not finding anything quickly dissipated when a single blonde hair was discovered on a red sweatshirt. It was a strand of Sarah's hair. The shoe found on the side of the road was soon confirmed to be Sarah's as well. And the Velcro strap on the shoe had picked up fibers that linked to the inside of the van as well. On February 6, 2001, following 7 months of testing and gathering evidence, Roy Whiting was finally charged with the abduction and murder of Sarah Payne. I'm William Whiting. I'm Detective Sergeant Hinchcliffe, and I'm going to charge you that you murdered Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne. Soon after being arrested in Kent this morning, Roy Whiting was driven in a people carrier back to Sussex. As he arrived at Bognor police station, an egg was thrown at the vehicle by one of several onlookers. Shockingly, he pleaded not guilty, and the family were faced with the pain of a trial that could end up presenting more evidence and facts than they ever wanted to hear. During the trial, Roy Whiting's previous convictions were withheld from the jury and media. Police worried that although absolutely relevant to Sarah's case, any knowledge of these convictions could jeopardize the outcome of the trial, and if he was convicted, Whiting could appeal, claiming he had been tried on the evidence of earlier crimes and not the ones linking to Sarah. but in December 2001, after a 4-week trial, Roy Whiting was found guilty on all counts. Said he'd be recommending that Whiting be kept in prison for the rest of his life. This was met by the loudest cries of yes in court. Whiting was taken away to begin that sentence tonight and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 50 years. Roy Whiting will spend the rest of his life in prison for the murder of little Sarah Payne, who disappeared in July last year. After the trial was over, his previous convictions were laid bare, and the jury and media now knew the full truth. This doesn't make us happy, but justice has been done. Sarah can rest in peace now, but let's make sure that this stops happening time and time again. People are being let out of prison when everybody concerned knows that this is going to happen again. Sarah, Michael. Can you describe that moment when you heard the verdict? I thought of Sarah and nothing else. Michael and Sarah sadly announced their separation in September 2003. They both said that the stress and emotional turmoil brought on by what had happened to Sarah had put too much strain on their relationship. Sarah gave birth to another daughter shortly after this, giving them 4 surviving children together. All of Sarah and Michael's hard work with Sarah's law finally started to make tracks. It was trial in 2008 and Sarah was awarded an MBE for her tireless efforts in making this happen. In 2009, just a week before Christmas, Sarah had a stroke brought on by a brain aneurysm. She underwent 2 brain operations in less than 2 days and was given a 50% chance of survival. I've no illusions here. This is going to be a tough mountain to climb. I've got a long way to go. I've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to have to work really hard in rehab every single day for the foreseeable future. If I get into the rehab unit, it means I'm going to be working every single day on just getting all those normal muscles that everyone uses every day, working in a normal way. She made it through it all and didn't ever slow down, continuing her campaigns. After she recovered, she endured relentless abuse and harassment from online trolls, including a convicted pedophile. But she never once wavered. And Sarah's Law, also known as the Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme, was finally extended across England and Wales. But another blow for the family came after Roy Whiting successfully appealed his sentence and it was lowered to 40 years instead of 50. It's 40 years, right? The guy's going to be in his 80s. Is he going to make it to his 80, but then is he going to be allowed out? He's got to go for parole. Are they going to let him out after that? He's got to prove himself. They ain't going to let him out. He ain't coming out. He ain't going to walk our streets again. Of course it's outrageous, isn't it? I mean, of course it is. I mean, David Blunkett gave him that sentence. He should have stuck with it. The guy, he shouldn't have even got a sentence. He should have just been told that's it. Well, all the time it was 50 years. My family and I could relax that he wasn't anywhere near children's hurt and there was no chance of him getting parole. So that was something that we could relax about. Right now, obviously, we're a little bit reeling from this. We expected it to be cut, and to be honest, it could have been a lot worse than it was. So, he still got his life sentence. The family obviously doesn't get a parole date. There is no parole date for the family. There is no end to this. This is our lives from now on. He is now eligible for release in 2041 and will be 82 years old. He is despised in prison and continues to face multiple attacks from other inmates. 11 years after her death, the man sentenced to life for her murder back in the headlines. Reports that Roy Whiting has been attacked by an inmate. The alleged incident at Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire saw one man hospitalized. Police have confirmed they were called to the jail on Friday morning following an altercation between two inmates. In 2010, a huge story hit the headlines. The chief reporter and former news editor of the News of the World were arrested today by police investigating the phone hacking. The police investigation into phone hacking at the News of the World sprang back into life. The humbling of a billionaire media mogul, Rupert Murdoch, a man who is not used to graveling, is on an apology tour this morning trying to contain the damage from that massive phone hacking. Home with materials and bags in a box. The News of the World's former assistant editor had already been arrested after going to a South London police station. Can you tell us what you're going to say? No, I'm not going to say anything further. I just said that I'm founder of the company. I was appalled to find out what had happened. It's kind of quiet now. It used to be a powerhouse of tabloid journalism. But this place, once the News of the World's newsroom, was where the seeds of a scandal were sowed. The arrests of journalists, the editors questioned in Parliament. If a rogue reporter decides to behave in that fashion, I'm not sure that there's anything to be done. I would just like to say one sentence. This is the most humble day of my life. The News International phone hacking scandal involved the now defunct News of the World and other British newspapers owned by media tycoon Rupert Murdoch. Various employees of the newspaper were accused of engaging in phone hacking, police bribery, and exercising improper influence in the pursuit of stories. Thousands of people were targeted and hacked. Victims and their families. Actors and performers, politicians and members of the royal family, sports stars, solicitors and high-profile cases, and high-ranking members of the police force, among many others. Almost 5,000 victims were identified. In 2002, Millie Dowler was abducted and killed by serial killer Levi Bielefeld. In 2011, Scotland Yard discovered Millie's voicemail had been accessed by journalists working for the News of the World and the newspaper's private investigator, Glenn Moore. Hello. Good afternoon. Yeah, hello. It's Glenn. Glenn, how are you? Just a very quick one. Voicemail reset on Gordon Taylor. And it's got Tottenham-related issues on there. Great. Is it the same number? The same number. Do not delete anything. It was also reported journalists had deleted some of her messages on the phone in order to free up space for new messages so they could obtain those as well. The deletions of the messages had actually led her family and police to believe she was still alive and active on her phone. They also deleted what could have been potential evidence. The Leave-On inquiry was a judicial public inquiry into the culture, practices, and ethics of the British press. And over the following years, a series of public hearings were held and the truth about what had been happening over the years started to unravel. Many came forward to speak at the Leave-On inquiry, including Kate and Jerry McCann, Christopher Jeff, who had been wrongly accused of the murder of Joanna Yates back in 2011. Numerous powerful and public figures, and those accused of crimes. Sarah Payne was also amongst those told by Scotland Yard that there was evidence to suggest that she was targeted as well. She was given a phone by Rebekah Brooks so she could contact her supporters, and it is thought that this phone was hacked. Rebekah Brooks was the editor for the News of the World at the time. Sarah said if this was true, it was devastating and disappointing. But she said the News of the World had been a force for good in her daughter's case and helping with Sarah's law. Rebekah Brooks said the idea that anyone on the newspaper knew that Sarah or the campaign team were targeted by Mr. Malaire is unthinkable. The idea of her being targeted is beyond my comprehension. It is imperative for Sarah and the other victims of crime that these allegations are investigated and that those culpable are brought to justice. Rebekah herself was soon charged with 5 different counts. Conspiracy to hack voicemails, 2 counts of conspiracy to pay public officials, and 2 counts of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. She was cleared of all charges in 2014 and resigned as the chief executive of News International, but was later reappointed CEO of the company, which is now named News UK. The phone hacking scandal brought down the News of the World and saw the resignation of a number of senior members of the Metropolitan Police Force, as well as many people working for the News of the World and News International. Rupert Murdoch resigned as News International's director and his son James resigned as executive chairman. But those affected were undoubtedly left in incomparable positions and forever will be. Although she spoke of her upset at the affair, Sarah Payne contributed to the final issue of the News of the World. She said in part, "It's easy to forget in these times that the News of the World has been a force for good and it has something to do with the people who worked on it. I do not pretend they are perfect or always got things right." She also said Rebekah was always in the foreground of the campaign. "I did not sleep. I could call at 2 o'clock in the morning and she would pick up the phone." The Payne family was soon struck with yet more heartbreak. Sarah's dad, Michael, sunk into severe depression and alcohol abuse after the loss of his daughter. He would have recurring nightmares and blamed himself every day for what happened to Sarah. Tragically, in 2014, Michael was found dead in his flat in Kent. He was just 45 years old. He spent his final days alone, drinking, telling everyone and anyone he spoke to that he should have been able to save his daughter that day. The coroner reported he had died of natural causes. And his father said, "We don't know exactly what he died of, but we think it was drink related." Her siblings also bear an emotional burden. "I'm scared to sleep at night half the time. So, I work myself solid until I pretty much drop because there's fears of what's there when I close my eyes. I create things that didn't happen or things that could have happened. I make scenarios up in my head which leads me away. So, I don't get a lot of sleep really. And in fact, I dread the nighttime when it comes to that point when I turn my head and I feel like because it's just you and your thoughts. I did for a few years beat myself up about it, you know, thinking that if I'd maybe ran faster or not ran through the corn, I might have caught up with her. Thinking that if I had had my head on that day realized what that she was, you know, in the back of that van, then ultimately as a 13-year-old kid, there's not much I would have been able to do. Hard to say how you kind of move on from something like that. I don't think it's kind of a process you can put into words. I think it's literally just something that happens day by day and It's not something that ever really fully happens. I think there's never going to be a day when you're going to turn around and be like, oh, I'm over that now, because it's just not going to happen. After something like that has happened in your family, I think everyone feels a bit of guilt, and why was it her? Why not me? I think that's gone through mine and my brother's minds, because it's why her, why not one of us? And I think you kind of feel guilty for even when something bad like that has happened to someone you love, you almost feel guilty for just even being alive. And they're not. Sarah's family have always been determined that her death would not be in vain. Officers described Sarah as one of the most resilient and extraordinary women they had ever met, handling every second of the painful case with nothing but control, strength, and grace. She has gone on to win numerous awards for her work in child protection and became Britain's first ever Victims Commissioner. She was then academically acknowledged for her work in social engineering with an honorary doctorate, becoming Dr. Sarah Payne MBE. I talk to her every day, always as an 8-year-old. She will always stay 8 forever. I can see through my other children what she would look like, and I have a good idea of what she would be like personality-wise. Sarah said. Writing letters to her has helped to make up in a small way for the teenage years and beyond that I didn't get with her. It has made her more real. I can hear her giggling. I can see her mischievous smile. For me, I want to always remember her as that lovely, sweet 8-year-old girl. A statue stands in Sarah's old primary school in memory of her. It symbolizes childhood, happiness, and innocence. A beautiful and fitting tribute that reflects the happy, loving, and kind-hearted little girl that Sarah Payne was. Her family worked hard to make sure Sarah will never be forgotten, and the hope is always that Sarah's lore will continue to help protect children and their families for many years to come. Story 5. It's been our sincere desire from the very beginning, from the moment of the kidnapping, that we do everything possible to comply with these demands. We want Mother back. And yet, we had to have the reality that this was definitely a kidnapping with wrongful intent and purpose. There were so many parts of that story that were unbelievable. Who would in their right mind go to an airport, dye their hair in the bathroom to mail a letter? 71-year-old Robert Heron lived in Jackson, Mississippi with his 73-year-old wife, Annie Laurie. Annie was from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. She had grown up on 14th Street, and according to her cousin, she was one of the most popular, beautiful girls in Tuscaloosa. Outstanding in every way, Robert and Annie had met while they were students at the University of Alabama. While at university, she had worked as the women's editor for the school newspaper, Crimson White. Robert had also worked on the paper, too. In 1940, Robert and Annie would marry. After the wedding, they moved to Jackson, Mississippi. During World War II, Robert joined the United States Navy, and upon his return, he worked for the U.S. Gas Company until 1955. The pair had 2 children together, a son, Robert Jr., and a daughter, Lori. Robert Heron was one of Mississippi's wealthiest residents. He was worth roughly $200 million. He was in charge of Mississippi Valley Gas Company, the largest gas distribution company in the state, Lamar Life Corporation, the second biggest insurance company, and the second biggest bank, Trustmark National Bank. Annie was frail, weighing 120 pounds and standing at 5 feet 4 inches, suffering from both arthritis and scoliosis. But she didn't let any of that stop her from being a huge part of her community. She devoted much of her time to various civic causes, making her popular and well-liked. She was the president of both the Jackson Junior League and the Jackson Opera Guild, was the co-chair of the Mississippi Arts Festival and the patron of the Jackson Symphony. She and her husband also funded scholarships and colleges. Another one of Robert's business ventures was being the president of School Pictures, which sold franchises across the country. People would buy the franchise and then take and publish Children's Picture Day photographs. The business ran into problems. In the early 1980s, they filed lawsuits against 12 franchise owners from across 8 different states. They were owed money and so started legal action to recover it. July 26, 1988 began as any other. Although he was in his 70s, Robert would often wake up at 4 a.m. to go to work. Both he and Annie were up early and the pair had breakfast together just as they had done for the past 48 years. Every 2 weeks, Annie would host a bridge club at the house, 139 Woodland Drive. And on this day, this is exactly what happened. Bridge began at 10:15 and went on for several hours. The group spent their time playing, talking, and eating blueberry ice cream cake. At 2:30 p.m., her last guest left. The housekeeper left at 3:90 minutes later at 4:30 p.m. Robert came home and saw her car was still parked on the drive. After checking the house, however, she wasn't there. He assumed that she had gone with her friends. However, by 7:30, she still hadn't come home. He called his son-in-law to help find her. They searched the house and the outside, but she was nowhere to be found. Robert called around other friends and family to see if they had seen or heard from her. Nobody had. She was a creature of habit, which made her sudden disappearance even more unusual. She always took her handbag with her whenever she went out. Worryingly, her bag and shoes were by her reading chair, as was the paper and her glasses. At 9:49 p.m., Robert called the police. They quickly descended on the scene. A sinister discovery was made. A letter by the door. It had been written on a typewriter, was littered with grammatical errors, and was directly addressed to Robert. It read, "Robert Heron, put these people back in the shape they was in before they got mixed up with school pictures. Pay them whatever damages they want and tell them all this so they can know what you are doing, but don't tell them why you are doing it. Do this before 10 days pass. Don't call the police. If any is dead, pay his children." It then went on to list 12 names. They were the people that School Pictures had taken legal action against regarding the unpaid debts. 11 of them were living and 1 had since died. The contents of the letter made it clear his wife had been abducted, as it was apparent that the kidnapping was linked to Robert's business. The police needed to know of any enemies and any that held a deep enough grudge that they would hurt his frail wife. Jackson Chief of Police J.R. Black said the note said not to call the police. However, Mr. Heron notified the police prior to the note being discovered. What was unusual about the letter was that the kidnapper was not demanding money for himself. He was demanding payment for other people. It didn't give a figure that needed to be paid. The lawsuits had been filed from the county court in Mississippi. Their names were a matter of public record and were easily available to the public, meaning the kidnapper didn't necessarily have to be one of the people listed on the ransom letter. Their son, Robert Heron Jr., said, "We wanted to comply. We wanted to do everything we could to get mother back." Searches throughout the house continued. Drops of blood were found on the carpet alongside a smear of blood on the front door. It was discovered that the blood type was the same as Annie's. Investigators theorized that she had been overpowered by someone and potentially hit over the head with something that the smeared blood also pointed to. Alongside having arthritis and scoliosis, Annie suffered with a chronic intestinal disease called ileitis, which causes inflammation of the small intestine. If she failed to take her medication, she would die within a matter of days. Her medication was still in the bathroom. The case involved multiple law enforcement agencies and they called on the help of the FBI that very night. Across the investigation, more than 100 FBI agents were brought in. The FBI contacted attorney James Tucker, who could advise them on the complex legal issues as the case continued to unfold. As day broke, evidence technicians and FBI officers were still trolling through the house, gathering as much evidence as possible, including handwriting samples and notepads to see if the letter had been written using paper from inside the home. It also meant they could rule out any handwriting if more communications came through. They had officers tap the phone just in case the kidnappers called. Due to the nature of the case, the media put a 24-hour blackout on the story, and her abduction was not reported on. 36 hours had now passed since the abduction, and police were hopeful that the tests carried out on the ransom letter would give them a solid lead. The paper didn't match any paper found inside the Heron residence. They also compared the typeface of the letter to every single typewriter manufactured in the 20th century. Tests confirmed that it was a royal typewriter that had been made between 1912 and 1927. No other information or evidence could be garnered from the letter, including fingerprints. One of the Heron's neighbors, a doctor who lived down the street, reported to investigators that he had seen a white van parked near his house. He said he initially thought nothing more of it, but found it strange when he came home later and it was still parked in the same spot. He approached the driver of the van who was reading a map and asked if he needed anything. The driver was agitated and responded by asking if it was illegal to park in the neighborhood. A few minutes later, the van drove off. Another neighbor also had something interesting to tell the police. 3 months earlier in April, they too had seen a white van driving around. Both times, the van would have had a clear view of Robert and Annie's house. This neighbor found the van to be so out of place and odd that they made a note of the license plate. Officers ran checks on the plates, but discovered it had been stolen from a vehicle at New Orleans Airport. So, this lead went nowhere. So, determined were the FBI to find Annie. Agents would actually move in with Robert and live with him. As the investigation continued, the police asked school pictures to go into their files and look at the records of the 12 people listed on the letter. They sent letters to the 11 surviving people asking what monetary damages they had, and what, if anything, they wanted. They only got a handful of responses, with those who replied saying they didn't want anything. Within 3 days of the abduction, The FBI reached out to officers from areas that the 11 people listed on the letter resided in to gather more information, and they began conducting surveillance operations on them. They needed to know if any of them had been in the area at the same time as the van or kidnapping. On the 3rd of August, the police made an announcement. They were looking for a Newton Alfred Wynne in connection with her disappearance. Wynne had been one of the names on the letter. Neighbors said that Wynne generally did match the driver of the van, and that very day, he went in front of a grand jury and said he had no knowledge of what had happened to Annie. The investigations continued. As the days passed without any more leads, agents spoke to Robert Heron and it was agreed that a press conference would be held. More than 10 days after her abduction, Robert made an appeal to the kidnappers. "My name is Robert Heron. My wife Annie Lurie was taken from my home over 10 days ago. My children and I have done everything humanly possible to obtain her release. Like any businessman, I've made decisions which may appear to others as unfailing, but those appearances are just not true. Moreover, those business decisions were mine, not my wife's. She had absolutely nothing to do with it. My children, and I appeal to whomever has my wife, that they may say that she may be safely returned to us." The story quickly became news across the country with major news outlets, including the New York Times, Time magazine, and the Washington Post, reporting on it. Following the press conference, the hope was that the kidnapper would be spurned into giving more information on how Annie could be released. It seemed to work. August 15, 1988. A letter arrived postmarked from the 12th of August and from Atlanta, Georgia. The letter was dated August 10th. It said, "Bob, if you don't do what these people want you to do, they are going to seal me up in the cellar of this house with only a few jugs of water. Please save me. Annie Lurie." FBI experts said it was her handwriting. The language on the letter was unusual. Family members said she would have used the word basement and not cellar and bottles of water instead of jugs of water, making it apparent that the letter had been dictated to her. But this threw up another problem. If the wording of the letter had been decided upon by someone else, they had no way of knowing if the date of the letter was even accurate. It again was vague, and so in a desperate attempt to comply, Robert Heron had his lawyers find out exactly how much the people in the lawsuits had been sued for. He then sent them all checks. The amount paid out totaled $931,000. Half of the checks would be returned. With every check, he added a note begging for his wife's return. This lead would also go nowhere. Dr. Rodrigo Galvez, a pathologist and psychiatrist, was also brought on board to analyze the letter and help investigators determine what kind of person they were dealing with. He said, "I am absolutely sure she is dead." They got in touch with the behavioral science units where profilers determine the characteristics of people to help officers in their investigations. One of the profilers who examined the ransom letter confirmed that whoever had taken her was likely one of the people listed on the letter. The grammatical errors the profiler believed was a deliberate attempt by the kidnapper to throw investigators off the scent, as was the old typewriter. One particular phrase stood out to the profiler: "Pay them whatever damages they want." The use of the word damages was odd. It's a legal term indicating whoever had written it had some sort of legal background or knowledge of the law. According to the profiler, this was revenge against Robert Heron. Whoever the kidnapper was, they were paranoid and willing to go to any lengths, including murder. It was most likely a white middle-aged male, someone working alone, or if they were working with someone, this man would have been in charge. Tom Montgomery, a special agent in Jacksonville, was drafted in to look at the one lawyer on the letter, Newton Alfred Wynne. After conducting the routine background checks, it was discovered that he had no criminal record. As part of the legal action taken by School Pictures for the unpaid debts, Wynne had been ordered to pay $153,883. In 1984 when either wouldn't or couldn't pay. So, Robert Heron had gone back to court to seize property to pay off the debt. March 11, 1989. Finally, the news came through that everyone had been waiting for. The FBI had made an arrest in a car park in Dand, Florida. Newton Alfred Wynne was taken into custody. But who was he and what had led to this? Over the last few months, the FBI had been tracking him and had launched an elaborate undercover operation to catch him. He had been on their radar from very early on. Newton Alfred W. was a 65-year-old civil lawyer from St. Petersburg, Florida, who lived alone. Above his office, officers had gone to interview him initially, and he said he had nothing to do with the case and gave an alibi for the day of the kidnapping, saying he had been in a bar with a sex worker. He said he had called one of his paralegals and asked him to bring the money to the bar so he could go home with the sex worker. The paralegal arrived and handed the money over. Wynne said he didn't know either the sex worker's name nor the bar they had been in. The next day, they visited the paralegal who confirmed Wynne's version of events. The paralegal said he too didn't know the name of the bar. Wynne had paid for the paralegal's training, and the paralegal was working on a very small salary, leaving officers to believe that there was a great deal of loyalty between them. Despite their protestations, agents were doubtful that they were being honest. The paralegal said that the issues between Wynne and School Pictures had started around 7 years before when they had foreclosed on him. To try and avoid his debts, Wynne had tried to declare bankruptcy not once but 3 times. A court order was issued to pay off the debts and U.S. Marshals seized items in stock including his prized car. 3 weeks before Annie Laurie Heron had been abducted, Wynne had been told about an eviction hearing, but he put his foot down and said he wasn't going to leave. The paralegal said that becoming involved in School Pictures had ruined W's life. They pulled information on the paralegal's vehicle and vehicles that belonged to friends and associates of Wynne. They found that the paralegal had a white van registered to him, a white van that Wynne had used. An agent went to speak with the previous owner of the van. She revealed that the person who had bought the van was Wynne. She described his behavior as strange and he told her he didn't want his name linked to the van in any way. So, she had left the buyer's name on the receipt blank. It was revealed that the van had been in a repair shop on the day Annie Laurie Heron had vanished. 1 week after the kidnapping, officers had the doctor who had seen the van driving around the area come to the station to see if he could pick out a photograph of the driver. He identified Newton Alfred Wynne. The other neighbor who had seen the van was also able to pick Wynne out as being the driver. They kept him under surveillance, hoping he would lead them to Annie Laurie Heron. When Robert Heron had sent the checks out following the handwritten letter from Annie, according to Wynn's paralegal, when Wynn opened the check to the sum of around $145,000 and read the note begging for Annie's return, he responded saying, what he wanted was his property back. Wynn sent the check back and added a note saying he hoped Robert would find his wife safe and well. 2.5 months after Annie's abduction, her case would be featured on the hit show Unsolved Mysteries. After the episode went out, hundreds of tips began to come in, and one in particular stood out. An anonymous caller contacted the police and told them that if a man called Newton Alfred Wynn was on the list, they needed to look at him. When agents realized she was a spiritual advisor, they weren't entirely sure, but soon learned she had a strong reputation amongst law enforcement and had helped them before. She explained to them that she had met Wynn 4 years ago. He had sought her advice about the issues he was having with school pictures. She told him that the courts were the best way for him to pursue action against the company. He said he had already tried that. He said to her he wanted to abduct the company's head and hold them hostage until his demands were met. He said he was looking for an accomplice and called her 6 weeks later to ask if she would do it. She refused. She gave the agents the record she had for her meeting with Wynn. She also agreed that she would contact him, arrange a meeting, and her office would be booked. He agreed and the meeting took place in December. She explained to him that she had seen that Annie Laurie Heron had been kidnapped, and asked if he had played any part in it. He denied it, saying he had changed his mind. As soon as he left the office, FBI agents were hot on his tail, but he didn't lead them to Annie. The FBI also found out that he was the owner of a cabin located in Swampland, and so they headed straight there hoping they would find her, but she was nowhere to be found. The FBI searched other properties and swamps in the vicinity, but there was no trace of Annie Laurie Heron. Newton Alfred sent thousands of documents to the IRS and told them to search for any disputed financial documents. Attorney James Tucker would say that this appeared to be an attempt at intimidation. And amongst all the paperwork, something sinister was found. Letters talking about a kidnap and murder plot. The IRS informed the FBI immediately. They were sent between Wynn and his ex-girlfriend and detailed a plan to abduct and murder her former husband. They even made reference to using an old typewriter to type out the ransom letter. They went to talk to her, and at first she denied any knowledge or involvement. She then came clean. She said that the plan to kill her ex-husband had been W's idea, and when she realized he wasn't joking, she ended their relationship. She said that she had last spoken to him on August 6, 1988, when he asked to meet with her in Dand, Florida. He asked her if she knew or thought she had been followed there, and he asked her if her car had been tapped. When she confirmed that she hadn't been followed and the car wasn't bugged, Wynn offered her $500 to travel across state lines to the state capital of Georgia, Atlanta. He wanted her to put a letter in the post for him. He had used gloves to remove a manila envelope from his pocket. This, he said, contained the letter to be mailed. It was wrapped in a gray napkin. When told her to pay for a one-way flight to Georgia from Daytona Beach in cash and to use an assumed name, she explained that he had told her to change her appearance once she got to Atlanta. She was to talk to nobody and take public transport instead of a taxi to a post office in East Point. He told her to book a flight back to a different airport in Florida, also to be paid in cash. He told her not to touch or even look at the letter. All she had to do was put it in the mailbox. Based on his instructions, she had even used a fake Scandinavian accent to avoid detection. Despite his orders, however, she had seen the address on the envelope when she posted the letter and was later able to confirm that the letter Robert had received from Annie was the one she had put in the post. This was just over 2 weeks after the kidnapping of Annie Laurie Heron. She told agents that she had got rid of the napkin on a deserted road and agreed to take them there. The chances of finding it there were slim, but unbelievably the napkin was still there. His ex-girlfriend agreed to meet with him again at the request of the FBI. She would be wearing a wire. They had told her to be more forthright with him and tell him that she knew she was now implicated in a crime. Wynn denied everything and made no mention of Annie or the plot. When he got out of the car, officers moved in and took him into custody. A search of his office was conducted and a vintage typewriter was found, but tests determined it was not the one that had been used to write the ransom letter. It was believed that a different typewriter had been left at the office to confuse the investigation. In his office, they also found a business card for a car rental company. The company confirmed that he had rented white vans on 3 separate occasions. Whilst the dates of the rentals didn't match the day Annie was kidnapped, one of them did coincide with when the doctor had spoken to the man in the white van who was parked near the Heron home. When was held at the Simpson County Jail while he awaited trial, he refused to have the court appoint a lawyer but said he couldn't afford one of his own. He told Magistrate John R. Countess 3, "I used to have some money. I have nothing now." Judge Countess told him, "If I appoint you a lawyer, I'm going to appoint you one who will be competent and I believe will do you a good job." Judge Countess did appoint a local lawyer to advise Wynn, but he said he would represent himself. Judge Countess told him this was not a wise thing to do. Although he was a lawyer, he had never tried a federal criminal case. By this point, FBI agents still hadn't questioned him. Jackson FBI spokesman J. Stuart Murphy said, "We don't have a right to talk to him. He has a right to an attorney before he talks to anybody. He does not have an attorney appointed right now. It's kind of confusing." Judge Countess didn't set a bond for Wynn. Hinds County District Attorney's Office said they were considering if it was possible to file capital murder charges despite having no body, but this didn't happen. The federal trial began in Mississippi on January 29, 1990, and would last for 2 weeks on federal charges of extortion by mail, perjury, and conspiracy to kidnap. Both the paralegal and his ex-girlfriend were told they would face no prosecution if they testified truthfully. It was revealed that by July 1988, papers had been filed by School Pictures to evict Wynn from the apartment he lived in and the office he worked from. The prosecution said that the closer the eviction date came, the more determined he was to carry out the plan. The paralegal had taken 4 trips to Jackson. When told him to watch the Heron house and take photographs, the paralegal admitted he had fabricated the alibi of the bar and the sex worker to protect Wynn, but said he knew nothing of and played no part in the kidnapping. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes before they returned their verdict. Newton Alfred Wynn was found guilty on all 3 counts. When the jury's verdict came back, Wynn gave a slight smile and said, "What is there to say?" He was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in prison. Her family and loved ones cried as the verdict was read out. Her son said, "We're informed that the investigation into whatever happened to my mother is continuing, and on that basis, we're very pleased with the result reached today." W's sister said, "It's not always the right verdict. I don't think he's guilty. He's not that kind of person." Prosecutor James Tucker said it could not be proven that Wynne had actually been the one to commit the abduction, but they were sure he had played a part in the plot. Wynne would appeal his conviction. It went before the U.S. Court of Appeals, but was flatly denied. Wynne would be released in April 2006, but maintained he had nothing to do with the kidnapping of Annie Laurie Herron, nor the extortion plot against her husband. Newton Alfred Wynne died in 2012. 2 years after the disappearance of his wife, Robert Herron sadly died in November 1990 at the age of 73 following a heart attack. He died without ever finding out what had happened to his beloved wife. 29 years ago today, the Jackson socialite was kidnapped from her home in the upscale Woodland Hills neighborhood. Drops of blood were found, and a ransom note. Time was critical. Annie Laurie Herron was frail and required daily medication. The Jackson media agreed to a 24-hour blackout in order to let law enforcement do their job. Then the next day, Jackson Mayor Dale Danks held a news conference announcing the shocking kidnapping. The family was desperate for answers. "It's been our sincere desire from the very beginning, from the moment of the kidnapping, that we do everything possible to comply with these demands. We want Mother back. And yet, we had to have the reality that this was definitely a kidnapping with wrongful intent and purpose." The note was interesting from the standpoint that I felt like Dr. Galves, who was a forensic psychiatrist, would be able to at least look at the note, analyze it as best he could to determine what sort of character we're dealing with here. There were so many parts of that story that were unbelievable. Who would, in their right mind, go to an airport, dye their hair in the bathroom to mail a letter? Newman Alfred Wynne was represented by Jackson attorney John Culte. You had New Orleans, you had masks, you had disguises, you had psychic missing pills. Just a lot of strange situations. Wynne was found guilty of plotting the vengeful abduction of the Jackson millionaire's wife. It was a case of circumstantial evidence all the way around. And as you put it, yes, it was a mystery. Again, he never ever even alluded to or by inference said, "You know, I did it," or "I'm sorry," or "maybe they'd need to look over here." I mean, again, it was a strange case. Annie Laurie Herron was declared legally dead in 1991. A memorial bench was put up by her husband's grave in Lakewood Memorial Park. Robert Jr. spoke about the complex emotions they were all dealing with as a result of his mother's abduction. "We've had a terrible loss. I think all along there has been a real mix of sadness and anger. It has been nearly 34 years since Annie Laurie Herron disappeared. She has never been found and her whereabouts remain unknown. It is the hope of her family that she will one day be found and they will finally have some comfort in knowing her fate and being able to lay her to rest. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of Annie Laurie Herron, please contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Jackson, Mississippi Division. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Scared True Crime. Stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.